Good evening. I'm very happy to welcome you to the ViZARTS Summit 2020. We are here at Medialogy, Aalborg University Copenhagen campus, where we're broadcasting from the Smile Lab. ViZARTS is a collaboration of several media institutions, educations and workshops. And the goal is to let filmmakers, animators, VFX artists, TV producers and other media people meet up with game developers and techies. And what they do there is actually to experience, explore and experiment with the possibilities of real-time filmmaking, virtual production and also interactive storytelling. Over the last 2 years we have organized 8 ViZART events, jams and workshops. And at these events the participants have produced examples and developed concepts of how the latest virtual production technologies and real-time filmmaking tools can be used for storytelling. At last year's summit we had several demos, hands-on workshops, short hyper talks and longer keynote speeches with hundreds of people. But this year of course we had to move everything online, as you can see. We can now see that all these activities we have done have helped many of the participants to get connected and to get started experimenting themselves. And we hope that the next 2 nights will inspire for even more collaborations and new forms of storytelling in the future. Now I would like to give the word to tonight's moderator, Lehman, who's going to take over from here. So enjoy the show and let's meet up for a virtual drink after the last showcase tonight.
Hello everyone. Thank you to Henrik for that introduction. My name is Lehman and I am your host for the next 2 evenings. I am an actor and my background is in motion capture and voiceover for video games and animation, and I am very excited about the lineup that we have for you these next 2 nights. Now, we do have one surprise, very special new guest that we've added to the lineup for this evening. Some of you may have heard already, but for those that haven't, we have DiGiordano and Landis from the virtual production team on Disney's The Mandalorian. They're going to be joining us at the end of the evening to talk about their work on that show, so please do remember to stick around. Now, the format for the next 2 nights is going to be quite simple. We're going to have our presenters, we're going to watch a short video that they've each prepared about their work, and then we're going to have a Zoom conversation with them, where we're going to ask questions that have been chosen amongst the team here, the ViZARTS team and myself. And you, the audience at home, will also get a chance to ask questions. So the way to do that is to write the questions into the comment section on the YouTube field. Now, the ViZARTS moderators will be watching the conversation and the comments on the YouTube feed, so if you have any questions or technical problems, feel free to write it there and someone will get back to you. All right? Now, the program is going to end around 9 o'clock tonight, roughly speaking, depending on how long we want to talk to the various guests for. And then we hope you're going to stick around afterwards with us for a little digital mingling event where we're going to have a chat app called GatherTown, where you can, I guess, meet with each other and just hang out and chat as though we were having a drink at the bar afterwards. So yeah, our first guest is going to be Matias Søndergaard from Rokoko, and he's going to do a demonstration of their Smartgloves live after a short recorded video, and then we're going to talk to him afterwards. So without further ado, Matias. Right. Thank you very much to Matias for that video. And now we're going to go to a live demonstration of the Rokoko smart gloves on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Alex, can you say something again? I just want to make sure
Yes. Can you hear me, Matias?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Welcome.
I didn't actually hear you in the introduction. I was waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Please let me know if there was anything I should know before I start.
No, we just told them that you were going to show us a video, and then now we're going to see the smart gloves in action.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for hosting this event and being the host again this year. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic.
welcome back.
And thank you, Henrik, and the Wizard team to arranging all of this. This is fantastic to be back and know this is happening in Denmark. So thank you, everybody, for that pleasure. And my purpose today is basically just to share a bit of insights of what we have been working on in Aalborg for the past year, and also come with a general invitation, which I would like to share with everybody at the end of this, and then, of course, trying to address the questions you have at the end. First and foremost, I'm Matias, and I'm the co-founder of Rokoko, building great products, at least trying to do so with all our great engineers and designers at the team here in Copenhagen. And we have had the pleasure of working with a lot of people in the community and virtual production community in Copenhagen, so that is awesome. And I'll just see if I can share my slides here. And please, Alice, let me know when you can see my slides.
Okay. Yes, I see Rokoko by ViZARTS.
Perfect.
Yes, there we go.
So first, what I would like to have is a demo, and then I would like to give you a small insights in what is happening in our studio software. And then I'll end up by giving a general invitation to a new beta test program we are announcing. So for the demo, first and foremost, maybe it's easiest if I start just the video feed. I actually have the gloves on. I dare to actually make a live demonstration of this. So if I go closer to the camera, you'll see this is our newly made smart gloves. And this can be used with the suit I have hanging here behind me, or without the suit. And it basically consists of a sensor per finger. You'll see one sensor here for the pinky, etc. for the sensor. So that's 5 sensors here. One sensor here for the underarm, and then there's one sensor on the glove hub. And the glove hub plays the role of collecting all the data from all the fingers and then sending all the data via Wi-Fi to our studio software. So you can basically record all your finger movements and also your wrist movement, because we have this sensor on the underarm, and then also the hand rotation. We're very proud of this, and we have only shipped a few of this, but a lot of more gloves will be shipped from next week and then for the rest of the year. So that is awesome. We have made it the design-wise, so it's a kind of an open finger design, or not kind of, it's an open finger design, so it's easy to grab stuff and take stuff and interact. So if you're an actor and you want to take a stick or a prop or something, you kind of feel present, and you can also type a keyboard and you can kind of interact with the world around you and still have the sensitivity of what's actually in your hand, and it's not too warm. The inside of the glove is designed with leather, so it actually feels comfortable, and you can continuously use them, and they will kind of take the shape of your hand. And these sensors will be placed on the second last joint of your fingers, fairly tight, so they will follow the movement of your glove. This is Ryan's, our product specialist gloves, so they are slightly big on me. I would recommend a size smaller, and we have 4 sizes. This is large, and I'm normally a medium. Good. Then there's no internal battery in the glove. You can connect it with the same battery pack like you use for the suit, but you can also use an independent battery here. So we have this arm strap, so I can power it up with this, with an external cable like this, and then hopefully it will turn up and light up, so it indicates it's online. And the third thing you have to do is pair this with our studio software to set up the correct Wi-Fi information on the glove to make sure that it sends the data to the PC you want to receive the data on. It's the similar process like you have with the suit, so people familiar with our suit will be fairly familiar with working with our gloves as well. Good. This is already booted, so you can see when this is booted up, there will be 2 LEDs lighting up on the back of the hand on the gloves. So now I'll show you how this looks in our studio software. 1 second, then I'll share another screen. Just want to make sure that we are live here. My screen, I'll go live here. And let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Perfect. So we just need this glove to be booted up again. 1 second. So now you can see one of the gloves are live in our studio software. And hopefully the other one will come live in a second. There you go. So now you can see the hands are basically just flying around. And I didn't apply any calibration on this yet. So the first thing you do is basically add an actor to the scene, and then you can pair the left and the right glove to an actor, which I'm just doing now. So now you have, let's say, I just want to put it around in the scene like this. 1 second, like this, so you get a better overview. This is the standard scene we have in our studio software, which comes with the gloves and also with the suit. And the only thing I have to do as a user is basically just apply a simple calibration routine. So I stand what we call kind of a pray pose. So I'll stand like this, I'm standing still. And then you can see it applied an offset to the fingers. And now I'm actually ready to record and use my finger animation for whatever character I have. And you can see I got a lot of freedom in all my different fingers, and I can move them around, and I can also do wrist movement, and I can rotate them in space as well. So this is how simple it is actually to set them up and get it online. When I give this kind of short introduction, it seems almost too easy, but I'm really curious to see what people can actually do with this. Of course, we have a lot of users doing content creation for animation and computer games where you need a lot of animation applied to your characters. Yes, and then the normal workflow goes. So either you can go in this scene and then you can work with just the gloves, and I can do a recording where I basically want to say hi, give a thumbs up with the other here, and then I can stop the recording, play them back, and then you can actually see that recording I just made. It records 100 frames per second, and then I can export all this data I just made in FBX or BBH with the frame rate you want. And you can also apply the animation in a stream where you also have a suit on. So you have both suit and glove. You can also do the same with the face tracking. So you have both suit and face and gloves in the same recording. I think this is one of Ryan's demo assets. I don't know how it looks, but now we try to play it. And he's one of our product specialists. So I'm just borrowing his PC, where you can actually see that this is a sample recording he did, I guess, earlier today or something, where he's acting out, where he both has the gloves, the suit, and the face. We're providing now with the iPhone. So you can actually do the full things very intuitively and easy if you're on a budget or if you have want to have a mobile setup. This is really a good way to work with that. Yes. And then the other way that people normally work with this is either in a recording mode, or you can also start a live stream. That means that we live forward all the data you have in your scene in studio. And the great new thing we also worked a lot with here, because we see more and more users working in different 3D tools, which is awesome. And we have spent a lot of time to getting up to speed, and especially with Houdini. So now you can live stream both your camera prop tracked with the HTC Vive, the face, the hands, and the suit in one scene to Houdini. So that goes for Houdini 18.5, where they also have a lot of new, very amazing animation tools. It's all procedural based, so it's super fast and super fun to see. So we got some awesome users playing with that tool as well. And the other tool we just announced support for is Cinema 4D. So in the newest version of Cinema 4D, it's especially used a lot in commercials and doing a lot of fancy visuals really, really quickly. So that's awesome. Where we again also support both the prop tracking, the face, the fingers, and the suit in one live stream. And you basically just enable here and you specify the port where you want to stream the data. I enable this. And now you can see an indication here in studio that now I'm actually live streaming all the data you just saw in the scene to that plugin via this port number. And I can actually also stream to Houdini at the same time, so I can stream to a lot of these applications at the same time. It can be on the same PC. It can also be on another PC on the same network, but you could also have a PC located another place. It could be in, I don't know, Aalborg University, where you want to receive the data in real time. If you had a fixed IP address, then you could also use this to forward all the data to that, and then you can actually live render whatever you see in real time. Alice, I didn't take time into consideration. Let me know if I'm saying a little out.
I think we've got about 5 minutes left here.
Cool. So this was actually a super quick walkthrough of the gloves. We start to sell this. It's around $1,000 US, and we have some beta testers. We have some influencers using them, and we get a lot of very positive feedback. So that is, for now, that is awesome. Yes. Let me go back to the other presentation so you can actually see that. Share this. So that was a super short demo of the gloves. I'll be happy to answer your questions afterwards. For Studio, you just saw a Studio version 1.18 where we announced the newest plugins, but we have also been working intensely on actually updating a lot of other features in Studio, basically rebuild the entire application from scratch. And some of the highlights, I think we also briefly touched upon them last year, but now we are actually coming to a very, very close where we can actually release this in a beta version and starting to have users using them. We're going to introduce a graph editor, like you know from Blender and Maya, where you can actually go in and you can manipulate the animation data as you usually do in a traditional keyframe animation pipeline. So that means that you can, of course, clean up and you can modify your motion capture data, but you can also start to import your own animation data, and then you can tweak that, modify it, merge it, whatever you want to do within the Studio software. Another key feature, which we will also present, which is super awesome, is you can import not only animation clips, but also your custom characters, and then you can apply a simple retargeting system to that. So you can actually play your role, and then you can import whatever character you have designed in Maya or Blender, and then you can live preview that character on a retarget, and then you can also manipulate that data either within the Studio software or as a live stream, as I just demonstrated before. The third major feature, which I would like to highlight here, is we are also enabled that all the scenes you're making in Studio, from Studio 2 and forward, will be a live scene, which can be synced with all your team members in real time. So again, that could be the entire Wizard team are live collaborating with a live shoot with Alex. So Alex can be at one location, acting out different things. Another one can be in the same scene, controlling the camera track. A third person can be on a third location doing another input to the scene, and everybody can live collaborate in the same team at the same time and record and add comments to whatever they want, both in a live session and in a post session where you want to edit whatever you've done. So facilitating a live collaboration workflow, which we think is awesome, especially due to these COVID situations globally. So the invitation goes that everybody who would like to help us beta test and get the kind of a first pick of these new features can actually join our Rokoko beta test program. There will be a few simple guidelines following the beta program. We very much like everybody signing up with a name and what do you do, so we can actually get familiar and we can get some kind of personal relationship, because we promise in return of some feedback for the different software that we will take all your feedback very seriously, and we will go into some dialogues and we will really learn and understand your workflows and your needs, which will hopefully be awesome and a really helpful way for us to drive the product development. And we will strive to have very open workshops on a bi-weekly basis to focus on the new animation tools we're doing, the new collaboration tools we're building, and all this kind of stuff. So we really know that we're building something that users and you guys can actually use on a daily basis in your creative process. And you can apply this in this form. I don't know whether or not you can see this link below. Maybe you can copy paste that, but that is where you can apply to become part of the beta test program. And all the communication will be carried out on a Discord server, so we can freely chat and communicate everybody all together. One happy family. That's it, Alice. I hope that's okay. Over and out.
Yeah.
Ready for.
Wonderful. Good. So we're going to transition to a little question and answer session here then. Are you able to hear me, Matias?
Yes.
Yes, fantastic, good. I wanted to start out with a question just about the gloves in general, because you've obviously they're a big thing. You've just released them. I've had a chance to try them actually, and I can say they're very comfortable, and they really, from an actor standpoint, you did a good job designing them as a piece of wearable equipment. I wonder if you could say a bit about. Obviously, the Rokoko suit launched a few years ago, so there's been a few years between when the suit itself came out and when the gloves came out. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the challenges that you encountered in trying to develop them, and why it was important to you to get them into the suite as well.
Fantastic question. Thank you for that. Yes, a lot of things came into the apply plan. I guess the main design principles we try to apply for all the tools we're making is making them non-intrusive from a creative point of view. We really want to bridge the gap from a technical kind of team group and an artist team group, and everybody understand the tools they're working with, so they can come together to actually solve the creative project they're set out to solve. So we want to embed the technology inside the textile, so it's very easy and intuitive to get inside and out. So it shouldn't feel too intrusive to actually do that. And the same principle applied to the gloves. That's why all the sensors are embedded in textile. And there's only one visual wire for the battery. That was kind of a compromise we had to make, but the same design principles applied there. I think the second learning, which we also have been trying very hard to achieve, is basically have still a mobile, affordable system, but yet a more robust system in terms of magnetic immunity. So we have with the suit, we use a magnetometer to also give position when you calibrate. The gloves are designed completely without magnetometer, so you will not have the same weakness in terms of metal and electronic devices, so you can actually more freely interact with rooms around you, computers and PC, and you will not see drift based on that. So in general, IMU systems face, that's kind of the Achilles heel of IMU systems. You will always see weak blind spots if there's a lot of metal in the room, because then you start to see drift because you cannot really trust the data. So we really try to overcome that issue by not relying on the magnetometer at all.
Okay, and sorry, just for people at home who may not know, what does IMU stand for?
Inertial measurement units. Cool. So you can kind of track motions either with, I guess, although there's a lot of different ways, but the two most common ways is either have cameras, multiple cameras, tracking these reflective markers in the suit, and that's what you know from Hollywood. So then you can triangulate. It's awesome, it's super precise, but it's a bit expensive, and there you can kind of have occlusion, meaning that I can walk in front of the camera line of sight, and when that cannot be seen, then it cannot track the object. How you show that with optical setups is more cameras, so more complexity and more static environment. With these initial measurement units, you can have a mobile setup, but it's all relative tracking to your starting position. So with the suit, like I did with that glove, you have a starting position, and then all movement are carrying out in relation to that starting position, because it has no idea where it is in space. And that's the same with the gloves. That's why the wrist was kind of locked. So the root was kind of locked to space, because there's no external reference. Okay. So that's kind of the difference. But you can make a very affordable system with IMUs, because there's IMUs in all our phones today, all our tablets. And so we use these kind of standard off-the-shelf components, tweak all the firmware a bit, and then we place it in textile. So you don't have to see all the sensors here. I can put it in my pocket. I can put on a costume. I can be Hamlet or something else. I actually act out all of these stuff, and I don't have to be seen by everything. I just have to be online, Wi-Fi wise.
Right. Cool. Thank you. We have an audience question about the gloves as well. Madhav, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Madhav wants to know, is it possible to purchase and run the smart glove independently without the full body suit?
Yes. Like I just did.
Good. Do you, is it possible then to, I've asked you this question before, I'm going to ask it again. Now that you have the gloves, can you map it to something that is not a human hand? Can you use it to, like, if you wanted to do a jellyfish or something, or can you map it to different things?
Yes, for now you cannot do that in our studio software. So you have to live forward all the data into Maya, but then you basically have a rig, and then you can control that it could be the eyes and left and right, or point around. So I think one animator now from Cyber, who's actually trying to animate some of his animated characters to do more like a digital puppeteering. Okay. What's it called? The guy he also used to be at Film, who was called Michael Hener. Okay. Animation director there. He also was very curious about digital puppeteering. So yes, you could basically control that, but then you had to retarget or remap that in Maya or Blender, at least for now. But yes, that's possible.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. Part of the focus we want to cover in the summit this year is both talking from a sort of experience, knowledge-based standpoint, but also somebody who wants to come in sort of blind to virtual production and motion capture, that sort of thing. So what do you think that, if somebody wanted to get started with Rokoko and motion capture from nothing, basically, maybe they have a bit of animation, traditional animation background, or maybe they're a filmmaker, what would you say, how should they start? What sort of skills should they build up on, and what's maybe a good way to start playing with the technology in order to become familiar with it?
That's a good point. I think it's very important to become kind of a part of a creative group. A lot of online communities now, which is awesome. Blender is moving, I think, the most fastest. So to understand the different skills and then find this is my interest. That can be artist work with characters, or it could be the animation side. Some want multi-artists like music. You want to play everything, which is also fine. And then you kind of find your sweet spot, and then you start to develop your skills on that. And then you can work with an actor like you. You can also try to act out yourself. But some really feel kind of not offended, but they have a, let's say, maybe it's not as natural to act out different things. That will be reflected in your capture with motion capture. So you can only capture as good as the actor can actually perform. And this is kind of limitation within that. So it's normally very good to find a kind of a good team where you work closely together, and then you can learn together as you build concrete projects. So I would suggest to find a concrete project. It can be a small game. It can be a small 1-minute animation clip. And then see how you can do that. And I know, especially the Blender community, there's a lot of really good tutorials. Use YouTube. You can learn a lot on YouTube. And it's very fast to start to make small stuff based on small tutorial sessions.
Okay.
We also try to build that. We have a small Rokoko Academy now for a lot of different introductional videos and how-to guides. So it should be fairly simple to start. And I'm pretty sure that we can find somebody who already got the hardware if you don't want to make the initial investment in Denmark. So I know Aalborg University have the hardware, Trumax have the film school has the hardware, there's some in Viborg. So I guess all of these major cities, and also Filmby Aarhus, there's also other suits, hopefully also soon some gloves. So there will be some hardware everywhere, and then people are not using the hardware every time. So normally you can kind of lend and you can borrow some of the different stuff.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. We have another audience question here. Patrick wants to know, do I need the suit to measure distance from one glove to another?
If you want the wrist to move around in space, then you need kind of something which gives you another input, which could be the suit. So that means if the fingers have to interact with each other, then the suit could be awesome there. Will not guarantee it's totally precise if you want to do finger interaction, but it will be much better what I just showed you. But you can use the Vive trackers, connecting them with your underarm, and that's what Manus VR is doing, and that's also what Exens is doing, having another external system providing you with the hand position, and then apply the hand position to all the finger movements I just showed.
Okay.
You need some kind of other system than just the gloves if you want the hands to interact with each other or with something around in the space.
Okay, so if you're capturing with just the gloves on their own, you're going to get the hand movements, but no spatial movement.
No translation in space. No movement. That's correct.
Good. Let me see what other questions we have here. So I think it's been very interesting for me to watch the development of the Rokoko project and see how it's really started to change things already, because I think it kind of took it wasn't, even if it wasn't the first inertial suit, you kind of you were the first ones to occupy a space of kind of having an affordable suit that lots of people could start using. So I think I feel like I've noticed an explosion in people working with this type of technology since the Rokoko suit came out, which I think is really cool. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you feel the field was like before the suit came out, what developments you've noticed already, and then where you're hoping Rokoko can take that industry in the future, and where you see things possibly developing along the line.
Super nice. I think there's a lot of things to reflect upon there, but maybe the most recent events globally, which is super interesting also to what we're doing. So yes, I'm glad, Alex, you saw these trends. We do the same, which is awesome. So we basically had this COVID dip in March and April. Everybody didn't really know what was going to happen then. But then actually with crisis comes opportunity in the sense of people actually getting home, reflecting on pipelines, creative workflows. You cannot be together, but we still want to produce and be creative together, but not physically. So we actually have seen a lot of really creative ways to handle the workflow and the pipeline challenges. And that's very good for us because there are people who cannot go to the big stages and centralize kind of capture volumes, but you want to really work from home, but you still want to do what you love to do. Yeah. So I think that has really caused a big reflection within the creative industry that you want to do in smaller, more agile, more decentralized teams, and you need easy to use tools to accommodate that workflow, which is super. So I think that's also what we've shown with the studio, the collaboration. And I think creativity happens a bit more like we're talking now. And a lot of kind of the creative process, especially within animation, has been very linear. So you have a pre-production phase, you have a production phase, a post-production phase, and you cannot really change anything, despite maybe you learned a lot of things, you want to do it all over. So I think these kind of non-linear production workflows with game engine and live collaboration really change the way that you are creative together. Yeah. Virtually, like we're now, or it could also be in the same physical location, which I think is super awesome. Yeah.
And is that with the, you were talking about the live stage in the new version of Rokoko Studio, is that, was that inspired by the Corona shutdown, or were you working on that beforehand already, or?
Working a bit, I think we have always been inspired by making everything in real time. So every single time you have to bake or you have to post-process or something, it's destructive for your focus and your workflow. So we really like to be here right now and acting out different things. It could be the directors interacting with an actor or the creative people being together. And that's really where you see the challenges, but also the opportunities you have. So that has been awesome, but it's definitely kind of boosted the interest for doing something for this, because we see multiple inquiries, not only for small studios, but also for some of the bigger studios, have been forced to reinvent the pipelines, being a bit more, let's say, open to use cloud collaboration tools. Normally there was a lot of IP protection locally, but now they have to open up to use Amazon Web Services or other kind of more standardized ways to sharing assets and data. So just that makes it more easy for smaller companies like us to build better tools around that.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. We have another audience question. Prob, I'm sorry, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Prob, will the gloves be available to Indian viewers, or is it only in Denmark?
No, it's globally. So I think already for the suit, we have, I think, users in 75 different countries. We have some import tax issues in Russia, India, sometimes China, but I'm pretty sure our small logistic teams will help everybody who wants to acquire them to get it done. We're now to set up small warehouses in Asia and some in the US to accommodate some of these issues. But yes, everybody can buy it. For now, we don't have any documentation, which is not in English. So we will accommodate Asian languages a bit more because we see a lot of interest there as well. But yes, everybody can buy it.
Okay, fantastic. We have another audience question coming in. Is that the full question? The question is, how does this affect actors and their acting? That's a question from Emma.
I think maybe you can kind of echo this, Alex. You know it from the other side. I think there's not a lot of mocap actors in Copenhagen and Denmark because the industry was small. So I guess most of them are kind of, I don't know, clustered in LA, working out of these stages. So they're very familiar with motion capture in previously. But I think from an actor's point of view, it's easier to get something at home, rehearse, practice, get a character, kind of get familiar with the character and the character. So it's kind of, you can prepare some shoots before the actual shooting and then see the traits and the pros and cons of the character before actually going to the interaction session. So I hope that it's easier for the actors themselves to be standing at home, having their own system, so they can actually try to see how it looks. A bit like you're interacting with yourself in the mirror. If you want to kind of see your facial expression or something else, then you have to do the same with your 3D actor. Because also in the design process, maybe you intended to make him a very bulky man, but it didn't really work. So maybe we should definitely, when you apply animation, a lot of things really happen when you apply animation and a more lifelike style to your characters, and then suddenly you find out that didn't work. Let's try something. So I hope that will help the creative process as well.
Yeah, Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, with things like we were talking about with the characters. Once you put the character body on, you might realize that the arms are clipping through the body or whatever, and it's easy. Kind of, I thought it was interesting. Just to what you're saying about actors having suits at home, that was a conversation that really I started seeing happen around the time that lockdown happened suddenly, because it's very normal for actors to have like a voiceover studio at home. And then suddenly everybody started asking themselves, do I need to go out and buy a Rokoko suit and figure out how to do the processing and that sort of thing? Is it another sort of like, is the rise of the home-based mocap actor possibly in the future? So it's definitely something people are thinking about. A very interesting question. Let me see here. Maybe you're not able to answer this, maybe you are, but I'll ask. Now that you've got the studio in development, or after the studio comes out and you've got the gloves finally on the market, what's next for Rokoko?
Yes, I think we'll do a lot more in the collaboration retargeting animation tools. So we're basically trying to sit down. We have also been growing, which is cool. So we've never been more developers, which is fantastic. So we're really getting into a kind of a product team taking care of all the animation tools. So we're really trying to listen carefully. How can we build better and easier to work animation tools? And kind of be very inspired how you make filmmaking, have animation clip, you merge, you blend a bit more automatically, and how can we utilize all the motion library data we have so you don't start from scratch every single time, but more kind of like you do with music in a pre-production phase. You just take some music and you use that as a kind of a placeholder in a kind of a blocking out different things. So we really want to speed up the process of getting from nowhere to at least a rough sketch very fast within an animation blocking pipeline in studio.
Okay.
So that's one area. Then another product team will focus a lot on kind of how teams collaborate, sharing, organizing assets, reviewing them, rating them, adding comments to it, a bit like you're editing a text document in Google Docs. The creative process is a kind of a process. You iterate over time, and you change, you edit. You want to get feedback, you want to review. So facilitate that process is also one of our key focus areas. And then basically we want to make all the data look better and more clean, and also be able to subtract style or add style. It could be drunk, and then you suddenly add drunkness to a movement.
Okay.
So maybe you can reuse some of your old animation in another setting without having to recreate everything from scratch. So really kind of tools would help you to be better and faster, to use your talent to add all the fine details, and not doing the 80% which can be boring in a creative process. So I think that's then, and then we are of course improving this. From the hardware side, we have a big focus on seeing, can we add a room reference instead of the H5 trackers? I will not tell too much about that. That will come next year. But then we can actually get a hand position, like I think Patrick asked early on. So we can actually get a hand position in space without the suit and without the Vive trackers.
Okay.
That could really be, because then you can do amazing digital puppeteering, where you can actually start to also use your translation and, I don't know, play music, control visuals as well. And you can start as an artist not only to apply animation, but basically use your fingers as a 3D input for your creative process. So that's another way, basically just utilizing our capture tools a bit more for creators around the world. So that's another focus of us.
Cool. So now that all the technical pieces are in place, you're going to work on tying it all together and working on the back end of it.
Exactly. And I think it's just going into God mode in studio and then do digital puppeteering, like taking access. So there's a lot of fun stuff. Yeah.
Good. We're just about out of time, but maybe there's one last audience question we can answer quickly. Lars asks, do you have a setup or a way to use, like with Vive controllers instead of a suit, to get the distance location of the gloves? I guess you sort of answered that already, but go ahead and,
It's not in the current version of Studio. You cannot do that. You have virtual production integration, so you can have the tracker, so you can kind of bind them together. So, but it's not, you do not see the visual result in Studio, but you can do that in Unreal Unity. And in the Studio version 2, there you can bind and merge everything together. That could also be action suits with our glove, or an Opticrat system with the iPhone X. We'll make sure that all inputs can come into Studio, so you can actually live collaborate with that in real time there.
Great. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for our time. Thank you very much, Matias, for coming back to join us. And yeah.
My pleasure. Have a good one. Have a good conference.
Take care. So that was Matias Søndergaard from Rokoko talking about the Rokoko motion capture system and the new Smartgloves. Now we're going to move forward to a Danish director named Rasmus Kloster Bro, and he is going to talk about some experiments he's been doing using things called depth cameras.
Hi everyone, my name is Rasmus Kloster Bro and I'm a film director, meaning that I've worked a lot with actors and cinematographers and whatever goes into making short films and feature films and documentaries and a lot of different stuff over the years. I'm currently at the National Danish Film School where I have a research grant working with video sketches as a fundamental tool for developing feature films. Meaning that I work with video really early in the process, even before there's a manuscript, to qualify and work creatively with the cinematic language and build upon that. When I say I'm jumping in at the deep end, I mean both creatively and technically, and I will get back to talking about depth cameras and working with them. But first I'll give you a detour to make it all make sense. Video sketches as a fundamental tool means working with video and cinematic language at the stage where you would normally only be writing. So I'm trying to qualify aesthetics or physicality or some other elements that I can't talk about, but I can show if I make a video or if I work with the cinematic language in some other way. And I believe that there is such a thing as a cinematic language and that it has some other qualities and possibilities than what we can write and what we can talk about. So I'm working on this story for a feature film. It's a medical thriller and it has the body as a central theme. I have this idea that the body should be the arena for the film. And I'm also working with a character who is doesn't belong on the surface, who belongs underwater, or at least transforms into someone who belongs underwater during the film. And I even had this dream about lying on the bottom of the ocean and being eaten by crabs, like this guy over here. And so that was kind of my starting point for what I'm doing now. So I'm exploring these ideas in different ways, working with actors and a choreographer, and in a kind of a classical improvisational way in the studio. But then I also, me and my team, we went out and tried to work with these crabs underwater. And we didn't know, of course, I haven't worked with crabs before. So we tried it out in different ways. One of the ways was going to an aquarium and having the biologists collect a few hundred crabs and then try if I could direct them somehow, which of course turned out to be pretty difficult. But the other thing we did was that we built a little underwater rig and we put a little mock-up of a special effects character on it and threw it into the water, hoping that some crabs or other animals underwater would attack it. And they actually did, which was pretty cool. And so we're exploring this whole crab thing a lot. But one thing that also happened when we threw this rig down into the water was that we found out that light acts differently underwater than it does here up on the surface. And what it does is the water eats away the red colors in the light, starting out from the red side and then leaving the violet and the blue light longer, which means that there's this dynamic relationship between color and distance. And of course, I expect if you are diving or if you've been working a lot underwater with cinematography, you know this, but I didn't know this. So it basically means that everything that's far away from you, or that the light is not hitting from the surface directly, so in shallow water, becomes greenish or bluish. And that's something you usually try to avoid when you film underwater. But I found it really interesting. that there is this connection between distance and color. And going back to this idea of working with the body as a landscape, I wanted us to explore that further. So we brought the concept out of the water, so to speak, and then into the surface world. And what you need if you want to work with color in relation to distance and distance from the camera is that you need a depth map or an idea of depth in the image. So what we did was we found this stereoscopic camera called a Z camera, and there are different versions of that. There are some Intel ones and some Kinects and some LiDAR scanners, but this was just what we had available to us. And then we tried to set up some different shooting scenarios. And to be honest, we fucked it up completely. I'm pretty sure that we can't really use the material that we made there for anything, because it was simply too rough and too uncontrollable. Maybe some of you, if you've worked with depth cameras before, you would know that it's probably good for machine vision or computer vision, but it's not really good for steady, reliable work with a cinematic image. It's jumping in both in the mask and also in the dynamics between light and shade. So what you want is you want a grayscale image going from 0 black to 100 white, and then you want to have that correspond to the distance from the camera. And it does so also a little bit, but not really, as you can see. What we did find out was a lot of concrete things that we need to work out to be able to do this. And maybe we'll come back to it. And maybe some of you people listening out there are better at this and you can figure it out. I would love that. And I can give you the specifics. And maybe there's another technology now that we can work with that didn't work before. Maybe it's not a camera, maybe it's an AI thing, or maybe it's this LiDAR cameras, or I don't know. What we did do instead was instead of going out with a camera in the real world and a depth sensor, we ended up making a pre-visualization of what we tried to do in Blender and had it rendered out. And then we can take both these layers. We can take the normal cinematic image and then the depth layer, and we can play around with the grading, with the color grading. And it gives some really interesting things. I think I'm only beginning to understand the possibilities of this, because now my mind is set on working with the body as a landscape, but maybe that's not the best way to use this. Maybe there are other things. Maybe there's right now I'm trying to find out how I respond to this aesthetic, this having this drop off of color, or other ways to play around with the image. But to me, it's really special, and it really does something to the image that I can work completely mathematically with distance. I never had the opportunity to do that before. And I think there are some revolutionary potential here. And I guess that takes me back to going into the deep end, because of course the pun is intended. We're working with depth cameras, but I also really believe in trying out new technological ideas to work with our expression, because for me this is part of human language. It's a very technical part of the language, but nevertheless it's something to take very serious. And I believe that we can push the aesthetics further and the way we communicate by trying out different things. And the camera and the whole process of working with the image is not something you cannot completely compare to an artist who has a brush in their hand. The camera has always been a technological process, going through chemistry or now going through digital processes. And that means a lot to what it feels like and what it says. So I'm hoping to do that a lot more. And it's not only with these depth cameras. I find myself often very fascinated with papers or stuff I find on the internet with AI manipulated images, a style that is transferred from somebody's hand drawing to a video image, but I have no idea how I engage with it. I can go on my computer and I could maybe find my way to a GitHub depository, but I could never get it running. But maybe in the future, and maybe if some of you guys can help us out.
So, that was Rasmus Kloster Bro talking to us about his experiments with depth cameras. And now we're going to go to Zoom, where we have Rasmus on the line, and we're going to have a little chat. Hello, Rasmus. Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Wonderful.
Alex.
Welcome. Thank you so much for the video and for sharing your experiments with us. Good. So I'm going to start the first question I have for you, because I'm a very non-technical person. I'm from the emotion movement side of things.
Me too.
Okay, good. Can you explain for those of us who aren't so familiar with cameras, what exactly is a depth camera and how is it different from a normal camera? And what was there anything? I know you said you were inspired by the what you found out about the way that color washes out underwater, but what else drew you to trying to work with these cameras? What are you hoping to achieve with it?
Well, yeah, there was a very direct link from this experience of being underwater and experiencing the color in a different kind of world. Mm-hmm. And then I guess I looked around for someone who could help me try out different things, or at least maybe stay in the metaphor, dip my toes into this idea, to get some feedback in my own system, in my own creative process, with how could I work with this. Mm-hmm. So we were hosted by Halon he's running The Volume, that I guess many of you know. He's inviting people to do a lot of virtual production things out there. Mm-hmm. And then Anders Thorsby, and they're both really experienced technical people, so they just found whatever they had available, and then we just met for a couple of days. But the depth camera, this set camera, it's a stereoscopic camera, and it's pretty old. Maybe it's a little bit outdated, really. Okay. But the basic thing is that it generates a grayscale map that corresponds to the red, green, and blue image. So you get another dimension in the image. You get a C dimension, and of course, in the same way that you can play around with the colors and you can color correct, then you can also play around with the depth. Okay. And that's I expect people who work with 3D animation, they have it handy already, as you also saw in this pre-visualization that we ended up doing. But I would like to take that out and merge it with this classical cinematography. But have this very one-to-one way of working with the depth and the color. Mm-hmm. So, of course, if you have a vision already of exactly what you want to do, you could just do it. You could mask out stuff, and you could have a classical color grading process. But I like, in this part of my process, I like to experiment with things. I like to put together different processes and ideas and see what come out of them, and not know everything in advance. Okay. So that was the idea, to get this combine this depth with the color image. Okay, cool. And can you explain a bit? So in the video at the end, you had the image of the woman lying on the ground, and you were playing with the different. You had the black and white version, the orange and blue version. Can you explain what exactly you were experimenting with in that, or like what was the process you were going through when you captured that footage? Yeah, well, then it was some really heavy-handed color correcting, and it was this black and white image, or the grayscale image, is the depth map, and then the other one is the output.
Okay.
So there's a really heavy-handed color correction, but it only applies. The white color is 100% and the black color is 0%, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. Okay. But then it applies it only so much to what is really black and a lot to what is really white. And that's another dimension of the image that I'm not used to being able to play around with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's what you saw.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience. Johannes asks, is the fuzziness due to occlusion from one of the lenses behind the edges of objects on the stereoscopic camera setups? Or if not, what is the reason? And then he says, P.S. love the artistic component of it.
That's good. Yeah, that's all I have really. It's I love to hook up with people who have this technical knowledge and experience, because I have this idea that we could do something, or I have this feeling of this expression could be something, but I need people to drive. And so yeah, so I'm guessing a little bit here. I think so. It's a slightly an old technology, but we researched it a lot, and I'm pretty sure that nobody really cracked the code of how to do this. There are some attempts with AI and some attempts with LiDAR scanners and also these stereoscopic cameras, but the common thing is that it's not absolute. So you don't have this idea that this many % gray is always 2.5 meters from the camera. So you can't really rely on it as a steady tool. You can't really feel what you're doing with the tool because it fluctuates all the time. I'm sure that it can be developed and with a more with a bigger setup of engineers, it could probably be done.
Cool. Now with something like this, I assume you have a lot of thoughts on the relationship between sort of production filmmaking and experimentation like this. So how do you see the relationship between really trying out something completely strange and cutting edge or new, or just sort of diving into something unknown like you're doing here, and its relationship to more traditional structured filmmaking where you've got time and money on the line and all that sort of thing?
Well, I come from a sort of a classical cinematic background. So we, at least in the Danish tradition, we have a lot of screenwriting. We work in the script all the time, and then we get a green light, and then you have a compressed pre-production phase, and then you go out onto the set, probably without a storyboard and maybe with a shot list if you really apply yourself. But I think the Danish tradition is very much improvisational. You go on set and you feel the place and you feel the light and you feel the people, and then you make it work, starting from the script. And it's really difficult to put in this kind of visual experimentation really early on. You can say, I want a whale and it should be pink and it should have a graffiti on the side of it. And if you can be really specific about that, you could do it in the post-process. But we're really not set up for that in the Danish fictional production environment. I think animation is a little bit different. It feels a little more familiar. So I'm able to do these things because I have this research grant, and I've done films before where without writing a script, I did spatial, aesthetic, physical tests or sketches, and then we got the film funded from that. So I'm sort of building upon that. Okay. But it's not something that's common, and I think it's really limiting our collective expression in the Danish film industry that we don't have a pre-production tradition, really.
And do you feel that since we're talking in a virtual production context now, one of the things a lot of people are saying is that post-production has become pre-production now that we have pre-visualization for setting up shots ahead of time, and if you're working with LED screens, then all of the environmental work has to be done up front. Do you feel like that might be a driver for changing that relationship towards pre-production in the wider Danish film industry?
Well, definitely, because if you have things on if you put up a LED screen, you have to have something on it. So that forces you to make decisions and aesthetic decisions really early on, because it takes some time to do the work and to do the artwork. But in fact, this depth camera experiment is kind of the same. It's just more of an in-camera approach. To be a little coy, you could say it's like the Instagram filters that you put on. So you have a little hat and ears, and your heart come out of your nose or whatever. It's an in-camera approach, and because that's the instant response between what you are doing and what it feels like to you. Okay. And that's what I'm looking for. So that's the real-time component of this, is setting up a machine. And I don't care if it involves a lot of people and a lot of hardware, as long as it works and as long as we get this instant feedback from it. Because that gives us it's all about risk. That gives us the comfort, or it gives us the courage to actually say, this is what we want to do, and we know exactly what it costs, instead of hoping that the VFX work in the post process will be up to standards. Yeah.
Now with these cameras, is your in this experimentation process, is your vision, like, if you had everything that you if you had your ideal working environment for this, do you want to just take this and go try to shoot a whole movie with it, or do you prefer to make little experiments and sort of figure it out along the way? Like, how much experimentation would you want to do while shooting a full-length film versus in little bits and pieces beforehand, personally?
Well, that's it. I think that before I've been testing out things in music videos and more like installation art. And I haven't done that for a while, because I've been in production. I've been always producing something specific for many years now. But I really want to get back to this risk-free environment of trying something extreme out. And I'm not sure that's a feature film at the moment. It could be. It could also be an experimental short or a music video, or I don't know, something else. As long as there is this creative freedom and the risk is okay. But even more so, I would love to have this, because we're one people armies all the time. We have an idea and we set something up, we get it funded, and then we meet and produce. But I would love more, and there are these things. The volume is one of them, and the conference is also one of them. These places where you get together and you try something out on a low risk basis.
Yeah. You talked at one point in your video about what you called the revolutionary possibilities for you working with these types of cameras. Can you talk about when you dream about where this could take you? Where are you thinking? What are those revolutionary possibilities? And if you were to say where you hope this might lead you in 5 years' time, do you have a sense of that? I mean, I know it's a kind of break everything out of the box and just see what happens, but do you also have a sort of through line for it right now?
Well, I guess I joke sometimes that the material for this film I'm working on now is this old Bauhaus book called Interaction of Color, because I'm a color fanatic in many ways, and I think there is a connection between emotion and color that goes around this, anything you could ever talk about. So that's the revolutionary potential is maybe inside one of my films more than it's for the whole society. But still, just for me, being able to work with color and in relation to depth in a grading software is that's already a revolution.
Cool. Let's see here. Right. So these are this might be a tricky question for your specific project, but we're trying to, with ViZARTS in general, we're trying to cover a wide range of potential experience levels. So, obviously somebody like yourself who knows a lot about cameras and filmmaking, you can kind of jump in and start playing around with this. Is it something you would recommend to somebody who, I don't know, sees your video and says, "Oh, that looks really interesting. I've never thought about that before." Like, how could somebody sort of jump in? Somebody who's perhaps never thought about it before, it hasn't thought about the possibilities. How could they sort of jump in on developing these ideas that, the way that you are? What would be the starting place?
Well, I guess that in the hands of artists, tools that feel completely useless suddenly become really, really useful. Because maybe it's a nuance, and maybe it's something, maybe it's a gimmick, but even the edit, putting two clips of film together, was a gimmick in the beginning.
Yeah.
So if you want to dip your toes, I would say just open your mind and see what feedback you get, what emotional feedback you get from doing something aesthetically or physically or whatever in your process. Just get it out into your hands or into your eyes and ears, because writing and talking is not everything. Yeah.
And is a depth camera, is that something you can get your hands on your own, or do you have to go out to the volume and get Alan to show you one? How accessible are they?
They're really accessible, but they are computer vision level at the moment. That's what I can maybe at ILM they have some better gear. I don't know, but even though we get a perfect result when we work inside the inside Blender, inside the 3D software. So maybe that's a better place to start. At least that's where I'm at the moment. More in a classical pre-visualization phase, and rather than maybe then we can find out exactly what we want to do and be a little more classical for the moment and do it in post.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, that's the end of our time, but thank you very much, Rasmus, for coming and sharing your work with us and for taking some time to chat.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, cool. Take care. Great. So that was Rasmus Kloster Bro. We've been talking to him about depth cameras and his experiments with them. Now we're going to go to another director named Mark Iversen, and he's going to tell us about his project, I Dream of Neon Nights.
I'm Mark Iversen, and I'm the creative director at Edheim Studios. I would like to first thank ViZARTS for inviting me and giving me this opportunity today to kind of shed some light into our own process here. And here we go. So we spent 6 months working on a project called Neon Nights Humanity Erased. And this project was essentially a prototype made in Unreal to kind of showcase what we can do and what are the opportunities to making cutscenes in real time. We used motion capture, we used facial tracking, and we worked with really great actors during our process. Motion capture is often thought as a cure-all for high animation demands, but this is far from the truth in my opinion. While motion capture does alleviate most of the work and can give a great visualization to the scene, what really stands out is creating a believable performance that the audience can get lost in. If done well, the viewer will forget that what's in front of them is not an animated character, but a living, breathing being.
Here's your passport. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Alice. You made me feel alive.
In Denmark, where budgets are low and productions are shorter, an actor's performance is usually portrayed only with voiceover and sometimes no voice, therefore no actor at all. This, in my view, is a wasted opportunity in utilizing all the strengths and nuances that an actor can provide to a game or animated film production. While progress in the Danish entertainment industry is there, other companies from indie to AAA around the world found different solutions and show us how we can use our actors to provide more depth to the performance of our characters. But all directors and actors are different, so there isn't one toolkit for every situation. Everyone has their own process and opinions. I'm still developing my own style and growing my toolkit with every new situation, And there isn't one way of doing all this, and that's always important to remember. Performance is critical for the screen. Great visuals or mechanics can be ruined if the performance doesn't meet the expectations of the audience. My ambition in Neon Nights was to explore the creative process of motion performances and how we can translate that full performance into an animated character. What we wanted to do was to capture as many elements of the performance in real time. This meant facial tracking and dialogue and body tracking, and these three elements then had to be streamed into Unreal Engine in real time for each actor.
Get back in your fucking cloud.
She's your daughter in there. Her signature shows.
This part was essential to me because I needed to see these performances in the final result, or close to. Staging and framing are also a considerable part to telling the character story, so my goal was not to be stuck in the live performance during a take, but on the monitor hearing and watching the live footage from Unreal. Motion capture has an added benefit by capturing the unplanned moments of a performance. What I mean by this is sometimes during traditional workflows such as animation, for readability and timing purposes, animation is determined by key poses, then in between are animated to smoothly transition from one pose to the next. This moment from the script was Nick grabs Isak and pins her against the near wall. He leans in closer during dialogue. But notice the performance. There's something more here. Nick shifts his footing as he leans in. A small but very human detail, but otherwise our actor would have just fallen over. These elements and not necessarily the full performance are what I believe we should capture, because in the end the data is processed and cleaned and in most cases reanimated to reach a higher quality. But it's these human essences that create more believable characters. In Neon Nights we had the extra challenge with filming the one shot. The entire performance had to flow from one scene to the next, and this meant a lot of planning and choreography was super important. Timing and position are hard enough without technology getting in the way. It's important to remember that a director should never have a perfect plan. Filming on set can have many problems or curveballs, tech breaks, bugs, or even crashes. Have a hard procedure for starting a take. Have one when the tech glitches during a take. And the number one rule, let the person on station fix it. And they will ask for help if they need it. In other words, too many chefs spoil the broth. And it's just as important to practice these procedures with your tech team as much as you do with the actors. When working with actors and operators on set, it is key to give them a good plan on timing and placement, but this will always change. It's more important to focus on what the intention of the scene is. I always start with the motivations for each character and the focus frames for the camera operator. Also, some directors will forget to talk about what happens before and after the scene that they are currently filming, and it really does help the actors get an idea of where they came from and where they're going. Keep direction brief and no more than 2 per take, and obviously avoid artsy languages that has no other sense than to yourself.
It's not a contest. The two of them, with themselves. So don't play it for real until it gets real.
And most of all, avoid direct and flat statements such as be sadder. I tend to set up a situation in their mind with the character, what the character is feeling at this time. Here I talked with Lars and gave him a situational direction. You are the chief of police and you've come home from a long day to see your daughter overdosing with a needle in her arm. What do? Are you a good cop or are you a good father?
Hvor har du været?
Jeg skulle lige ordne noget, skat.
All of this will help the performers understand and bring their expertise into the scene for you to adjust and balance for consecutive takes. The camera was also tracked during the takes. I wanted the audience to feel like they were in the scene with Nick, an observer at the moment with all the performance was playing out, and to forget that they were watching it through a screen. The camera is the only way to experience the character, and we have total control to help the audience feel through it.
Helena.
She's beautiful. When was the last time you spoke to her?
Yes.
Nick, I know this must be really
Don't.
She's
dead. She's dead.
When I woke up after transcending, I screamed so loud that the Odin tech engineers had to mute my vocals. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything. It would be months before I was able to control my matter and not face through the floor again and again.
She's dead! Isak. They killed her! They told me she could be saved, that I would have a home that evening. They never told me that they terminated her. Like some fucking sick dog!
Camera and cinematography are normally underutilized in the gaming industry.
And what have we done to deserve this?
Well, I guess it all started when you decided to murder each other in front of the hospital. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Man, Roller 7 started all that. They killed my cousin.
And you hit back at them and so on.
And I wanted a more cinematic and camera movie approach to how the camera felt. So it was important to design and build a rig that made sure that a traditional operator for a film felt at home with the equipment and not lost with the technology. The weight and the movement had to be limited to the physical movement of the operator, and the only difference was that the viewfinder was streaming the virtual set and the characters for the operator to frame with. Working in tandem with the operator, we could talk about where the focus shifts during the shot, and it made it a lot easier when we could instantly play back the Unreal cutscene and adjust to strengthen the performances of the actors on set. Lastly, I would say the most important thing in creating a more believable performance, it may sound obvious, but it's not always done. It's to have the actors act against each other, to treat the performance like you would on a real set, rather than breaking down the performances to individual sound booths. It's so important that they can look each other in the eye and play through each other's performances. Even if there is no dialogue between characters, having a great monster performer to immerse the actor into the scene is by far better than asking them to act to an invisible space in front of them.
Svar mig nu for helvede! Undskyld, far.
The Neon Knights prototype was created not only because I thought we had a cool world and a story to tell, but to see how we can strengthen the bridge between the film and the games industry, to show that we can use each other's strengths and to continue to tell damn great stories that we do in Denmark, to bring all types of actors in our stories and bring our characters to life. I believe that the performance and the character is a good place to start, because ultimately it is who our audience connect and hold on to as they journey through our worlds.
So that was Mark Iversen and his project I Dream of Neon Nights. We've got Mark on the line now on Zoom, and we're going to go straight to asking some questions. Hello, Mark. Can you hear me?
Hello. I can hear you.
Good. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the video. And I also wanted to say thank you for your focus on trying to bring actors into this process and how much you love working with us.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So I think the biggest question I wanted to ask you, what's so interesting about this project, besides the fact that I think it looks really cool, and I think the wider world is really cool, is that you are really focused on trying to do something of really high visual quality, cinematic quality, on a Danish budget. And I wonder if you could just at the very beginning just sort of walk through what your pipeline setup was, and how it worked for you, and what you'd like to, if there's anything you would do differently on future projects.
Yeah, so the project we made, Neon Nights, was done in a film school graduate project. It was my graduate project, and it was a whole year that we used to develop it. The first 6 months was kind of pre-production. Traditionally, with more world building, we spent a lot of time doing lore and doing a lot of these pipeline tests to see like if this was possible. And we developed a small 12-second previs in Unreal Engine without any knowledge. So then we moved on to the actual production, where we had the film day. We had 2 film days, if I remember right. And it was basically the entire budget was about 100,000 kroner, a little bit more than that for the entire year. So that's really, really small and minimal. But the main thing that I really focused on was trying to find tools that helped our team and me find the fastest way to get rid of those menial tasks. So we use a lot of like Quixel, Unreal Engine. We used what's it called, ZBrush, and we worked with partners such as Rigsters for 3D scans and Rokoko for the motion capture. Anything to kind of help us get rid of all the hard work and kind of get to the fun work. Yeah.
So is it fair to say in a way that you kind of wanted to use the technology as a way to make a virtual production shoot as close as possible to sort of a more traditional film shoot, where it's about the people and the interaction and the creative process?
Yes. Like I said, I'm from the Danish Film School, and I was in the animation department, and I am not a great artist. I don't draw very well, but I'm a big tech nerd. So it's about trying to use these tools, and my network, my background come from Trumax Academy and a lot of CG artists. So yeah, it was more, let's bite the bullet and see if we can do something high fidelity.
Okay. And did you have a background in live film production as well before that at some point, or did you start out as
Not at all. Okay. Literally, I've only been working in virtual, as in like CG worlds and mainly some video games. The only kind of experience I've had before that with actors is on a what's it called, animated basis with voice acting.
Okay. Because it seems like, having worked with you on that project, you really feel like you seem like you're at home on a film set. It seems like that sort of live interactive process is really inspiring to you. Could you see yourself going back to doing any other kind of animation, or do you sort of feel like this virtual production motion capture stuff is where you are right now? I'm trying to, like, I think this is like my way forward. I always like to say that, like, it depends on the story I'm trying to tell. People say, should I make games? Should I make films? I say, do whatever the story calls for. If I'm a big believer of bringing back stuff like Atlantis and El Dorado, and if we can do that, that's great. But still using technology and using the actors in a way that isn't just booths. I have a thing for booths, and Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned you're talking about video games. What we saw there, obviously, is it's footage from cutscenes that fit into a video game. Can you, and it's clear that you put a lot of attention and care into creating the cinematic, high cinematic quality for those scenes, down to having the actual cameraman there and tracking the camera and that sort of thing. So it seems like the filmic quality is very important to you. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that those aesthetic choices carrying forward into the game part of the project?
Yeah. So at least with this project Neon Nights, the idea of the cinematic moments
still cater towards like game animation and all the kind of stuff, and we use motion capture and Rokoko to develop animations for the gameplay itself, because ideally, like I said, like I always say to the production team, it's about getting ourselves 80% there, and then the rest of the work is not cleanup but actual restoration. And like for example, I teach a workshop on rapid prototyping for game development with Rokoko suits. So like Matias said in the previous talks or whatnot, it's just a matter of, it's a tool. It's how you want to use it. It's not necessarily only for the actors, but if an animator wants to animate, instead of recording yourself on a camera, literally record your animation, use it for reference, or work on that actual FBX. Game designer needs a new shooting mechanic, shooting animation, put on a suit, 10 seconds later they'll have one, and then they have a prototype.
Yeah, cool. What would you say are the current bottlenecks in using, in the sort of the virtual production setup that you were using? Like, what was because obviously, you know, when you're making a trade-off with you know, using a sort of affordable budget tools and that kind of thing, what's you know, you don't have the sort of high quality, you know, what's the word, like Rolls-Royce systems that they have in Hollywood. So where are the biggest challenges in working at your sort of at this sort of level right now?
So at our level, and in most places in Denmark even, like we're kind of a hackathon nation. You know, we like to kind of tinker our way through to get the results, and then we'll figure out how to make it all work perfectly later. So a lot of the times requires a big tech team or a dedicated tech team. I know for a fact that if I wanted to do Neon Nights myself, it might take me about 10 more years if I had to do it all myself. And I don't ever want to do things myself. As you said, I kind of rely on people with me. So the big bottlenecks are essentially the fact that if you want to do a production in this kind of capacity, you need the tech team behind you. And you were there. Our space command was five people, because Lars was basically head to toe with different kinds of equipment, from Rokoko to our own rudimentary face tracking and all that kind of stuff. And if one of those things breaks, it's basically different points of errors, then you can't do a shoot.
Actually, and you mentioned the face tracking. Do I remember correctly, the face camera that you used on Lars, was that something that you made yourselves, or you sort of, can you tell us a bit about the camera you used quickly?
Yeah, a lot of people talk about the camera because it's hard to find. It is a hackathon again. We had borrowed a Dynamics rig from Aalborg University, but we couldn't use the infrared camera because the Vive trackers rely on infrared. So we had to make our own setup, which is a webcam and a Raspberry Pi with a great technical director, Patrick. He coded his way through a Raspberry Pi over a weekend to get a remote and wireless face tracking system so that, like, what I didn't want basically is I didn't want Lars to have a pit crew every time we had to end a shoot or end a take. Or anyone for that matter. So yeah, like it is kind of like our own kind of hackathon 1 week project, just to kind of get our face tracking wireless.
Yeah, nice. We have a two-part question from the audience here. This is Madav, who asks, the first part of the question is, films continue to push the boundaries of realism, especially with character performances. With recent improvements in motion capture and render engines, do you see the gap between VFX film and game development closing?
Definitely, you see it now. I mean, you're gonna get and congrats to ViZARTS for getting some Mandalorian members with us. But I mean, virtual production essentially is real time. Can encapsulate the real timeness of things, and I think we can see more in the video game side that they're becoming more filmic and cinematic. You can look at God of War or Jedi Fallen Order, like character driven cinematic experience with action. We don't do that a lot in Denmark. That's also why I propose stuff like Neon Nights, because we're good at making really fun games and really deep TV shows, and I think they need to kind of start combining. And in terms of the film side, you see them using, like, again, I call it like the plan, commit, and then regret. When you have these big productions for like high VFX, and you can't even see what it would be like until 3 months down the line. And if you could just see 10% a week later or a day or even now, you will at least have that iterative process where you can just make it better and better.
Cool. And the second part of Madhav's question is, do you see the new tech pushing game developers to spend more time in post to get the full actor performances transferred?
Actually, I do not. I see them spending more time in the actual performance on set. Because, like I said during the video, it's about capturing those unplanned and more human moments. If you capture a full performance, and I think we talked about a little bit, Alex, before about I called it like acting resolution.
Yeah.
When it gets too high, it'll become very uncanny. And what you don't want is to have all that uncanniness, but what you want to keep are those, again, the weight shifts, the slight twitch in the head, the fact that there's an unplanned nose rub or whatnot. It's those things you keep, and then you enforce, and then you clean the rest to kind of get that appeal back into the performance. You even notice with our character Nick, we purposely kind of down stylized him a little bit more than just having a full scan, because it would just look very uncanny.
Yeah. Cool. On the front of continuing with our theme of what would somebody do if they basically want to just start out. Let's say you're a young aspiring filmmaker and you've just seen Mark's presentation on I Dream of Neon Nights, and you say, oh man, I want to do that myself. Where would somebody start?
Start where I did. I started at the film school, but I think what the main thing that really helped me and how we got this really great team was that we didn't aim big in the beginning. We dream big and we think small. So we made this little very, very crude 12-second piece, but it showed potential in a way. And then what we did was we found people who had the skills that we need, or were driven to gain the skills. And we showed them that thing and said, imagine if you were on board.
Yeah.
Imagine if we had 10 more people, and we slowly built up from there. There's a very big thread with the Neon Nights production. There's a documentary of it now, and there's a Rokoko interview and everything. It's a main thread is ambitious project. And I love it, because for me, ambition doesn't mean impossible, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how hard you want to work on that.
And can you, sort of segueing from that, there's I know that you have a personal working philosophy of trying to work with mistakes and incorporate them well into the project you're working on. Are there any, if you're talking about a Danish scale production and working with the limitations of the not having the Rolls-Royce system, did you have any experiences where you found that there were limitations in the systems you had that led you to creative decisions?
That's a good one. I mean, like hair, IO Interactive. If you're listening, I understand why Agent 47 has no hair. We made a lot of mistakes, obviously, and like for example, it's a mistake that we wish we could kind of recreate. I mean, as Rasmus Kloster Bro said, like failing is good, and I have a motto for myself is fail fast and fail often, because the more you fail, the more you know what you need to do, right? Stuff like the tech, I always have this like tech breaks, so we'll spend a week before we film just testing and testing and testing and testing, because we know it does. What's it called? The stuff that I definitely shouldn't do or whatnot. I think it'll be like I'll redo it all again, and I'll make the same mistakes all again. Because I mean, every production is going to be different, and you're going to make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, cool. We have another question from the audience. This is, what potential do you see in virtual production? Why should filmmakers move to this pipeline, and is it stable enough?
I wouldn't say it's stable. I mean, like it's as stable as you need it to be. Filmmakers tend to often think, and I'm also one, what's it called? They tend to think as virtual production as like, look at this new shiny cure-all. This is going to be the new way the way we make films, and it's not. It is a tool in which we can make films. It's a degree of how you want to use it. I convey to a lot of the fictional filmmakers sometimes about using virtual production to previs your entire movie, to kind of get an idea of how you want to film, practice. Do you realize you need more people in this scene? What kind of lighting are you expecting? And then go out and film your film as you normally would, but with a better idea of how you want to do it. Because we have such low budgets, we can't afford to make too many mistakes.
Cool.
In a sense.
Last question, I think, was we're about to wrap up. Are there any new tech things or improvements coming to this industry on the horizon, maybe 3-5 years out, or trends that you see sort of starting to develop that you are excited for, or think are going to make another leap forward, the way that being able to have some of this production stuff be more accessible? What are you waiting for, basically, or what are you inspired by?
As in, there's so much piece of technology coming out, and it's crazy. I mean, I'm looking forward to like new RTX technology, to kind of like a better, more consistent ray tracing technology. I know that
Sorry,
NVIDIA.
just for people like me who aren't technical, what does RTX mean?
It's like it basically how our graphic card computes light to make it more realistic, or sound more realistic. Reflections are more real, and it creates a bit more depth to the scene. But for example, I know NVIDIA, the graphic card company, they have like a new system coming in where you can take characters from the games that you play and mocap and face track them, so you can make machinima from within the game engine, which is really, really fun to try and play around with that. And then of course Rokoko's gloves, I've been waiting those forever, because as I like to say, and I know Rokoko also agrees with that, it's like hands are the windows to intention, and it's so important to get those in. But I think what I'm looking forward to seeing more is just getting more character, getting more actors in. I think performance is so underutilized, and it's just so important. And like to spread out and to create more opportunities for every kind of actor is even more important. And I think that's going to come very, very soon.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's about all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much, Mark, for coming and showing us I Dream of Neon Nights and talking to us. And hope you have a good evening.
No worries. Thanks.
Cool. Take care. So that was Mark Iversen, and we've been talking about his project, I Dream of Neon Nights. Our next guest is named Robin Guiver, and he's going to talk to us about the work he's been doing in the UK using puppets on set in virtual production.
Hi, I'm Robin Guiver and I'm a puppeteer. And that means over the past 10 years, my work has led me to be everything from dinosaurs, dragons, mythical creatures, horses, moving bushes. It's been eye lines and it's been animatronics and everything in between.
Hello. PFX is performance FX, and what we do is we provide, in a nutshell, on-set solutions to any creature, alien, or element that in the movie will be CG.
Hi, I'm Robin Guiver and I do performance effects. And if you haven't heard of that before, don't worry, because that's the name that we've come up with as a group of actors and puppeteers for the work we now find ourselves doing in feature films. We come from a background of low and no budget theatre where we make our own work using very little except the imagination and the body. And now we find ourselves working on feature films with a lot of heavy visual effects components, using traditional art forms of dance, puppetry, movement to try and bring digital creatures and environments to life. Puppetry is an extremely effective art form for communicating with people quickly and clearly. There are a few cultures in the world that haven't discovered it, and it's something about the way the human brain works that really accepts this practice of taking something inanimate and bringing it to life. There's a part of our brain that says, yes, I'm going to go with that, I'm going to play with it, I'm going to believe it, and I'm going to engage and see what it's going to tell me. It's that part of our brain that instantly recognises symbols, and with the right puppets, creating the right sketch of the right creature, you have that moment where you see it, that's something alive and real. So my life as a puppeteer certainly hasn't always been with visual effects. In fact, I never dreamed that's where I'd end up. I started making tiny shows with very simple puppets that I made myself, and worked for 10 years doing all kinds of different scale performances, different genres of performances with masks and puppets, until I had quite a big break in my life when I got involved in the stage production of a show called Warhorse. Warhorse has now become huge. It's gone to multiple countries, it's toured the UK several times, but it all started with a book by Michael Morpurgo in which a horse is the main character and narrates the story. And when that was adapted for the stage, they immediately knew they couldn't have a real horse on. There's no way that would give us the same performance every night, and so the creators of the show, in particular Tom Morris, contacted a company called Handspring Puppet Company to come over to the UK to help train puppeteers and to build these kind of feats of engineering that would represent life-size or even larger than life-size horses on stage. And the way that worked was a team of 3 people would get inside these creatures, get inside these constructions, one in the back, one in the front, one in the head, to give back legs and tail, front legs and breath, and then the actual movement of the head with the eyes and the ears that are all of the emotional indicators of a real horse in real life. And in the show, the horses fight. They pull ploughs across the stage. They're chased by people. They're ridden by actors in cavalry charges. They do everything and more than a real horse. But the whole trick, the whole great success of that performance is about making people believe. And that's really what the work of the puppeteer is about. It's about tricking, cajoling, make-believing and playing with your actors, with your audience, so that they believe too. Even if it's only for moments, that's enough for the imagination to engage and to see, instead of a big wicker basket, a living, breathing creature. Puppets we use with visual effects are never actually going to appear on camera. They're always going to be replaced by animations. So then, what's their purpose and why do we need them? That's a question I couldn't really have answered until I found myself jumping in feet first into a very unique film.
So as a puppeteer, my first foot into the film industry was with Gravity about 5 or 6 years ago. And again, there's no puppets in Gravity either, but at the time, the visual effects team, the stunts team and the director were trying to work out how to create that sensation, that movement of having no weight. And as soon as they put actors on wires, they could create the shapes that they wanted, but you saw all that strain on their necks and their muscles of having to hold their bodies. And the terrifying, wonderful thing about space is that actually there's no effort whatsoever. So you don't have to work hard to get anywhere, but at the same time, if I can't reach something, I'll never, ever reach it. And so it's beautiful, but also makes you very powerless. And so we came in to work with their stunt team to help manipulate hands-on the performers, so they could literally touch a part of the set, and then we'd help them travel and fulfill that. And it was part choreographic, but because they'd animated so specifically what the movement was, it was really quite technical about following the physics of what a movement would do and how a body would move in space to facilitate the actors and ultimately Alfonso's vision.
Some years after I work on Gravity, and having had the amazing opportunity to do some practical effects puppetry in film as well, I was invited in to meet David Yates as he was working on the first Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them film. David was looking for a way to realise the literal menagerie of different creatures that the characters came into contact with in the film. And he laid out what would become the key elements of what we now do with performance effects.
The film is full of kind of incidental moments where just in the background something's moving around alive, a little creature, a swank or something is there. And those moments really the animators can take care of very well. But whenever they have a moment where an actor really interacts with one of these creatures, where they either physically touch them or they've got a direct impact on the scene, on the story of that scene and the direction it's going, then by bringing on a puppet of whatever sort, which might be very simple, just a head of a creature, or it might be very big, like a whole kind of skeletal body of something big like the Erumpent in the first film. Then we've got something for our camera department to work with and for our actors to really interact with. And if it's big, then they can really look up and see it's big. If it's small, then they can really, their eyes can focus on that right size. So then when they rehearse with it, if we then take it out, they've got that experience to relate back to in their imaginations really clearly, really immediately. And I guess our work as puppeteers really it is not so different from the work as actors in that we're dealing with something that has a personality, emotions, motivations, and through talking to the animators and the concept artists who have created these beasts and have a clear idea of where they come from, what they want, how they might move, then bringing that to life in real space becomes really exciting when we look at reference of different animals. So if we've got a creature like the Kelpie, which is part horse, part fish, and based on a completely mythological creature from folklore. How much horse do we use in that, but then how the undulation of how something moves in the water feeds into that. And then really, does that thing trust Newt in that moment as well, or does it not trust him? Is it aggressive, or is it friendly and affectionate or playful? And making those acting choices for those creatures as well, and that David can then direct and tone down or push up, is the most exciting part of this, really.
Bringing digital creatures and characters to life, so the creatures and characters that will eventually be animated, but giving them some kind of presence on set has a really technical aspect to it as well. And so working with our visual effects teams on various different productions, very often their animation department has done their animation tests, their character studies, their walk cycles, and those will be passed over to us so we can then commission the elements of the puppets we need. Things like how big is the Erumpent, or can the Niffler reach that, is it able to jump that far, how long would it take for Pickett to walk from here to there? All of these questions are ones that we're studying these walk cycles for, to look at walk and run speeds. We're building our elements of our puppets to say, okay, they can reach this far, or they can jump from here to here, or that's how it looks when they jump from here to here. Being able to answer these questions on set with our physical puppets is really, really key. So even if we don't need a fully formed puppet that looks photoreal, having one that's the right size and scale so our camera department can frame up on it is absolutely central to our work. Having something there that our actors can touch, if they have physical interaction, has the right texture, that's safe for them to touch, is also key. At the same time, we don't want to build a photoreal piece if it won't be used. We don't want to be wasting money in one department when we could be spending it elsewhere more effectively. So we try and keep our work as simple as possible. So these three elements are: 1, having a physical representation of the creature. Now this is really key, because if we've got something that's correct to scale, whether the creature's huge or small, fast, slow, it gives our camera department something they can accurately frame up to. Therefore, when the animators go to put the CG models into the frame afterwards, they know there's enough space in the frame for it. This is really important. It also allows the focus pullers to set their focal marks based on our moving these through frame. It lets our DOP compose shots as well, with big creatures, with small creatures. This was particularly key when we had the Erumpent on the Fantastic Beasts first film. This creature was huge, massive, and it really allowed our camera team to make some good choices about where to put it.
We actually had a full-size Erumpent puppet, very lightweight frame, and they were able to sort of use that on set. And our guide was always what we'd done in the computer in terms of the animated previs, but it meant we could put something on set for Eddie Redmayne to react to or perform against. So the Erumpent, 17 foot tall, 20 foot long, was able to be on set, and everyone could see how big it was and where she was on the set, and then we could frame the camera for her, and Eddie could play against something. It was very important. One of the key things with this film was that you believe the creatures were real.
Number 2, interaction with the actors. Now, there's both physical interaction, when an actor is grabbed by a creature, or they pick it up and look at it. And all of those moments can be really complicated to allow the real world and the digital world to interact. And so here we get into all the different possible ways that we could bring this to life. Now, this isn't to say that the actors we work with aren't amazing. They all are, and their imaginations are incredible. However, when we want to bring in an animated creature, to expect someone to mime perfectly every single take is a really big ask.
The Niffler is absolutely everyone's favourite. He's small and cuddly and intelligent and cheeky and has in both the last film, this one has a big impact on the story as well. And so we've got multiple Nifflers. We've got ones that have a little rod in their head that are really good at looking and interacting and making eye contact. We've got ones that are on the end of sticks that we can run around very fast for the camera to follow, or for us just to work out exactly what its pattern of movement is. We've got ones that really are just like a big black beanbag that are weighted. So once the actors rehearse something, if they're picking something up, so they're not having to mime it and worry about that while they're also performing and delivering lines and interacting with the environment, then they can actually have something to hold up, and we'll pass that into them. So they're actually holding this thing that has some weight and some body to it they can physically touch. And so every time they do touch it, the animators can see how the skin, on a very detailed level, is affected by that as well. And on an emotional level, feeling something that you touch there has an impact on that performance as well.
And the third element, and for me the most exciting and creative, is having a puppeteered performance for the actors to interact with. We've talked about their physical interactions, but then there are emotional or just rhythmic, comic interactions between actors and digital characters that are really, really important. If an actor believes what they're playing with, can surprise them, can perform back, then that performance is going to be so much more real and have so much more variety within it. It allows the director to then direct the creature's performance, the digital creature, in a way that the actor can see and respond to, and the camera can frame up on and choose to follow that performance if that's helpful and necessary. And so that puppeteered performance is really, really important.
I mean, the actors we have in this film are phenomenal and all have fantastic skill sets. But what putting a puppet on set allows the director to do is to then direct the creature that otherwise wouldn't be seen at all. So as an actor, Eddie can know what he's acting to and give his performance the right level based on that, rather than being surprised and saying, oh, I thought it was here when it was over there. But it also allows David as a director then to ask for more from the creatures on set as well, and for the performances to be working in real time as well as in the post-production process. So right now, Newt and Tina are being taken to the execution chamber, and Newt has a trick up his sleeve, and he's signals to Pickett, who climbs inside his jacket, down his arm, and unlocks his shackles, and is then able to attack one of the executioners to distract them. And what we're able to provide then is a sense of what that might feel like to the actor. So rather than us being on camera with the puppet necessarily, we can give him a real sense of what that creature moving across him might feel like, so he can experience a real response to that in advance of having to create it fictionally. And then also for the actor playing the executioner, that sense of having a creature attacking, grabbing, moving, they've got a real experience to draw on then, as we've been able to puppeteer it before they're then creating it on camera themselves.
One of the greatest strengths of our team is that before we were puppeteers, we were all actors, and that puts us in a very unique position, because I think it means that we are able to provide an environment on set for the cast where our puppetry style is very sympathetic to helping them create a believable and realistic connection with the creature or object or puppeteered element that they are there to interact with. Because ultimately, what we're striving to do with VFX puppetry is create the truest and realist connection between the actor and something that in post-production is going to become a computer-generated element. So obviously there needs to be something there on set, there needs to be something there for the actor to interact with, so that that performance is as real and as true as it can be. And so ultimately that's that's really where I think our team shines in our ability to provide that.
Today we've been getting the Rampant puppet out to give it a run around in advance of shooting on nights next week. And it's a chance for our puppeteers who have to work very closely together to really get a sense of their communication inside the puppet, which is a very physical process. So rather than shouting left, right, up, down, faster, they can feel the pushes, the pulls that allow those three different individuals to communicate as if they were one creature with one emotional journey. And then tomorrow we'll be doing more work with the choreographer, with the animators, to feed back more into the narrative of that so that we're able to improvise and adjust to Newt and Eddie's performance on the day.
And so our process of bringing a digital creature to life on set begins with the animation studies and the work the animators have done. We take this, we study it, we'll build small puppets, mock-up puppets, and explore that movement in the real world. Look at physical interactions and possibilities. Share these with the VFX supervisor, with the director and actors as necessary. Develop our puppets, prepare them to go on set. And then on the day, we bring with us what we need, which might be a whole huge puppet so the camera can frame something very, very big, or it might be just a head, or a hand, or a ball with some eyes on, but something that we can then bring to give just enough performance for the actors to interact with, to have a relationship with, to play with, to make believe with, and then to recreate those physical interactions and those emotional performances for that creature as well.
With Eddie, you know, ultimately he doesn't want to look stupid.
You know, we worked more with him than I've ever experienced with an actor in pre-production, rehearsing with our characters and building up those relationships. So I think it was really important to the success of the film because, as I said before, if you believe the actor and you believe the creature's there, that's what makes it work. When you see an actor and their eye lines are not right and the creature doesn't seem to be responding to them, you know there's something wrong and you're always conscious of it.
So the comparisons between digital effects and puppetry are many. Both art forms try to breathe life into impossible things and to realise worlds, environments and creatures that are mythical, magical and amazing. And on set, when we bring a puppet there, it's a tool for the puppeteer to perform with, but much more importantly, it's a tool for others to help them imagine. And this imaginative, emotional interactivity has really become key to us helping achieve a really believable performance between a digital creature and a real actor.
All right, that was Robin Guiver talking to us about his work using puppets on set in virtual production. And we've got Robin on the line now from London. We're going to go straight over to him. Hello, Robin. Can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Yes,
hey, Alex.
Wonderful. Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's great to have you here. Just for the people at home, I would just give a bit of context here. I'm very excited to have Robin here with us tonight because we trained at the same school many, many, many years ago. And I spent a number of years in the experimental theater object mask world in London that Robin came out of as well. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to have him here to talk about the really cool direction that his career has taken. Yeah, so thank you for the video. It was really cool. I've been wondering where I could find information about what you've been doing, and then suddenly here we are. Yeah, so I wanted to jump in with kind of a big question, actually.
Yeah.
I think your journey is really interesting because obviously you started in that small experimental theater world, and then, as you said, you had this big break on Warhorse. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember, I think you told me once that when you did Warhorse, nobody knew it was going to be as big as it was. You sort of thought it was just another R&D job where you were going to spend 6 weeks playing around with puppets, probably in a room, maybe not many people would see it, and then that would be the end of it. Is that a correct characterization of the...
I mean, not far off. When I joined the show, it was transferring to the West End, so they knew there were people who wanted to see it, but right at the same time, the credit crunch had hit the UK. So financially, we thought it was going to be a disaster, and we were very wrong.
Yeah, thankfully so. But I think it's really cool because it did start out as a sort of experimental project in a way, and then you and the team. It seems that the team of performers that Warhorse built has really. You've all kind of migrated now into the wider world of, or a lot of you have migrated into the wider world of big budget films. So I think it's a really great story about investment in artistic experimentation, then feeding into the commercial world. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that journey and what it's been like, and whether you have any perspective on how those two ends of the artistic spectrum could inform each other and work together a bit.
I mean, that's a really nice way to put it. Certainly, the work I do now on these kind of huge, big budget visual effects led features. The big difference between them and the world of theatre, for me, is that you go from being a huge cog in a tiny machine, where so many of the decisions are being made by a very small amount of people, and that's everyone in the room, to these massive features where you become a tiny cog in a massive machine. And yet when the spotlight lands on you, you need to be ready and really hit your mark and hit that level of excellence so that it can move on to the next person as well, and you pass the baton. But in a kind of a financial respect as well, the big budget projects certainly allow funding for artists who have a world within there, has some work within them, to then go and take the time that allows them to go and make their own projects as well. And certainly that's always the aim, is to balance up our own artistic endeavors as performers, as artists, as creators, with the contributions to these much bigger projects that which are extremely rewarding, which teach us so much. But then we need to take that work, take what we've learned there, and then put it into our own work as well, I think.
Yeah, good. So you can get a kind of a feedback going back and forth, kind of up and down the chain a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. In terms of one of the themes we've been trying to cover a lot tonight is how can people who are new to these kind of techniques take them on and jump in, and also how are these techniques? Are there ways that these techniques can allow people to be more creative in this sort of strange environment we're in this year, where people are separated and locked down and that kind of thing? So I want to give that to you as kind of a two-part question. If someone sees this presentation and they say, "Wow, that's really cool. I'd love to start using puppets in this way on my production," how would you recommend that a filmmaker, I suppose, get started? And do you see any way that that process can help people be more creative during this strange time?
Interesting. I'll try and answer both parts of that. In terms of incorporating puppets into work as a filmmaker, I mean, there's practical effects, which is a whole world in its own right, which is a very exciting one. But in terms of incorporating puppetry into the visual effects side, that's so much about that's very tied into physical production a lot of the time, in terms of having something real to interact with. But I guess the first place we start would be either to find a puppeteer or a performer who shares an idea or a vision or has a sensibility that excites you, and just to start a conversation and a collaboration and see how the animation, the visual effects side of your work could integrate with theirs. Or indeed, whenever I've spoken to animators, many of them love to perform and act out reference themselves for their own characters. And it's the step between acting out and performing your own work and actually using a puppet in production to interact, or puppeteered elements, a head, a ball, a physical interaction, is a very small step indeed. Puppetry is just acting with just a little bit more distance. And so you'd be surprised at how instinctive it is to pick up. Does that? Well, there was another part to the question as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess the second part of the question was sort of how are there ways that you can see that that creative process being a way that people can continue to be creative even if they can't, sort of get together for big productions and that kind of thing. Do you see a way that you could work in this way, sort of with remote teams, for instance, or with a small, single person groups, really?
Interesting. I mean, that's certainly a challenge with the idea of interaction, and that's been a big challenge for us as well. I mean, England's in lockdown right now. The film industry is continuing under kind of very strict health and safety regulations and risk assessments, but it's certainly changed the way we're working. We're having to do a lot more of puppetry on longer rods rather than being close up.
I guess that's a benefit of puppetry. You can just put a 6-foot pole in there. Yep.
Yes, exactly. But in terms of working remotely in smaller teams, I suppose even just having a discussion, interaction, kind of performance call with someone remotely, where someone's able to get up and act out and have a physical experience that they can then translate. If you're talking about interacting with an animated character, they're not going to be able to have someone there to actually physically be with them, but to have someone just narrating to them, talking to them, or letting them physically act out something, so there's a genuine experience when the actors or the performers recalling that when they're performing it again. Even that is just going to raise the level of that performance, I think, so that they've got something genuine in mind. And as an animator, as a creator, I think having had that conversation before the shoot and in the pre-production side of things, I think the more everyone can be on the same page about what those interactions are about, physical, emotional, the more likely that performance is going to be still telling the right story, that when the animated characters dropped into that, we really believe there's something real and happening there.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. We have a two-part question from the audience here.
Sure.
Madhav asks, are there any improvements in the technology behind puppeteering that makes it more easily available for smaller productions? And that's the first part. Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of puppeteering technologies, I guess a lot of the more complicated practical effects might use animatronics, which are fairly high-end, kind of complicated builds. But one of the beauties of the work that we try and do, that we bring to productions, that I think is very accessible to everyone, is that really we're just taking very simple things, objects. Anything can be turned into an eye that can look at things and have a kind of interaction with something. It doesn't have to be a beautiful puppet made with, it's not a marionette. We're not looking for amazing technique. We're looking for interaction and feeling. And if you've got nothing else, if a puppet's got some eyes that someone can look at, drawing 2 dots on a ball, sticking some googly eyes onto something, already the human brain will start to make a connection with that automatically, and the imaginative playfulness begins. So I think it is a really accessible way of working.
Yeah, that's the great thing about puppetry, is that it is inherently lo-fi in a way. My favorite part of the video is where you cut to just the black glove with tape on it and then walk through how that builds up into more and more complicated things.
Yes, although the black glove is clearly the most successful of all of them.
Yeah. It has the most lifelike movement. Yeah. The second part of Madhav's question is, animation in post sometimes lets productions skip the puppeteering phase for cost-saving reasons. Do you see that changing in the future?
That's interesting. I certainly see in film and TV, which things like His Dark Materials, when I'm talking about TV, kind of quite high end. As a BBC have done an adaptation of that recently in England, are beginning to use more and more interactive elements for CG characters, especially when they've got young performers in lead roles as well. We found it on Artemis Fowl as well. We've got our young actors being chased around. We had a great big troll puppet that rampaged through the house there to kind of give them something real to interact with as well. So I think I'm seeing it being used more and more on the high end of things, and I think for me, I feel very strongly that it is an extremely accessible way of working. I would really like to see it being used wherever it's useful. However, you certainly see, a lot of animators or animation supervisors who know their characters really well, who know their teams very well on a smaller scale project, may not need a puppeteer because they can jump in and they can be that character themselves as well. If you've done the animation reference for it with your own body, then perhaps you don't need a skilled puppeteer to come in on a smaller project, because you can just get in and be that character yourself.
Yeah. Is it because it, like you said, you'd like to see it being used more? I'm really fascinated by this because it seems like a brand new way of working with puppets in a way. Is it fair to say that it's that it is new in that sense, and that it's something that has been kind of pioneered by this group of puppeteers in England? Like, is it being used in other places, or is it kind of, are you guys kind of the core home for that?
I mean, it must be being used elsewhere. It must be. I mean, I haven't seen. I'm not aware of groups that do specifically work for visual effects, for a team to do that. But it'd be, I can't imagine that there aren't other teams elsewhere. I mean, I always look back at one of my favourite films, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where you've got the animated characters interacting with fantastic performers. And they absolutely were using puppeteers there. You know, I've met some of them. I know it happened because you really believe those physical interactions when Eddie's tie is getting pulled by Roger. You know, they put the time and effort into the practical side of that as well to really sell all those gags, and it really works. It's still such a satisfying, enjoyable film.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that movie. We have time for one last question, I think, and that is, you mentioned, or maybe it was one of your colleagues even in the video mentions that you talk about how a lot of people have a lot of the performers, they have a traditional acting background. Maybe a lot of them weren't puppeteers to begin with. I know that certainly it seems like a lot of people who worked on Warhorse maybe came out of a normal background and then were trained as puppeteers on the production. Another two-part question. How would a traditional actor go about using their skills in a performance effects context? No, maybe we'll keep it just to that. How would somebody who comes from a traditional acting background who sees this and thinks, oh, that's really cool, start to translate their skills into this world?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think the most important thing is just it's about character and story and performance. The technical side of working with visual effects comes into, well, what are the minimum elements we need if we're going to have to do a pass with a performer in there and then take them out and do a clean plate afterwards, then you can get away with a lot. But if we've got to actually animate over the top of a puppet, if it's holding someone's hand, picking something up, handing something to someone, then you've got to start getting creative and clever and really start talking to the animation team, the visual effects supervisors, and say, well, look, what do you need here? You know, I mean, this story is about a character being given something very, very precious by this ancient beast, but actually, once they've made contact with this little tiny puppet creature, which we're going to put our animated amazing goblin head over, really we just need to have the thing that's being given there as well. So we have a little eye line in for the head. We'll pass this thing in on the end of a stick, and the person can take it. But we'll have the puppet there as well, so that they can interact and they know where it is. The camera can frame to its size, and then we can take the puppet out and just do that minimum bit of effort. But it's all about those conversations, I think, with the visual effects team, because they will always know what they need. Yes, and it's just being willing to find the best way to work for that as well and solve those problems.
Cool. All right, that's about all the time we have for the night. Thank you very much for coming and sharing sharing your work with us, Robin. And thank you for taking some time to talk to us.
Oh, I hope it was helpful. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Right. So that was Robin Guiver talking to us about his work using puppets in virtual production. Our next guest is Iris Magdalena Schmidt from Virsabi, and she's going to talk to us about the new studio that they have opened here in Copenhagen.
Hello, my name is Iris. I have a background as a film director, and I work as creative director at Virsabi. Virsabi specializes in virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and now virtual production, which utilizes the LED screen behind me. Let's take a look at some of the products and projects we've made with virtual production. From what you can see on that camera, we're in a small studio where we have the LED screen behind me. We have a 2-camera setup, we have a monitor, we have computers running the screen and running Unreal, and then we have Opti trackers in the ceiling that track the position of that camera. So if my friend and colleague Amalie here moves the camera, the trackers are tracking that on top of the camera, and that creates the effect that we see behind us, where the background moves in parallax. What we've been able to do at Virsabi here with this studio is that we have taken the newest technology used in the film industry and mixed it with what we've otherwise known from the game industry to create environments where we combine a 3D environment and the real world. The idea behind using this technology at Virsabi is that we take something that's traditionally known from the film industry and we move it to a place where it gives value for our clients. A big idea is that we're going to use it we've already used it for live streams and doing studio shoots, but also, especially now with COVID-19, it's a big thing that people can't travel. So instead, we can create 3D environments where we can move the client to wherever location they want just by filming on the screen and changing the backgrounds like this. The idea behind these projects and films is to increase the export of Danish design, especially when it comes to furniture and fashion. We had 7 design companies, and at the moment we have 3 fashion companies that are chosen to go through a free course where we challenge their ideas of what's possible within their field and the technologies of augmented reality, virtual reality, and virtual production. I'm going to delve more into the virtual production part of it. So just focusing on the last one, virtual production, we talked with each of the brands about how they envisioned using the virtual studio in their marketing approach and created, in collaboration with the brands, an environment that suited each of the 7 brands. And then it was up to each of the companies how they wanted to interact with that. We created product launches, CEO and designer talks, and explainer videos where a company manufacturing chairs separated various parts of their chair to show how easy it was to build. Let's have a look at some of the projects that we did with our clients using the virtual studio.
Hi, my name is Alessandro Saffatti, and I'm the founder of Step, a young company with a long history. Before we start, let me turn this on. In the world we're living in today, it is easy to share knowledge, and with that knowledge sharing comes the availability of technologies that before were only available to the few. At Step, with our research, we find novel uses for established technologies, not usually applied to the lighting design. By this process of combining unexpected elements, we create new inventions. Technology is ingrained in our DNA. It inspires creativity and new possibilities that connects both past and future.
The design process of Simone started with exploring the main element of almost every textile product, the yarn. She researched the traditional technique where bundles of yarns are twined together, forming a thicker rope. Zooming in, you can see that the rope itself is already a very beautiful product. Vintage is one of the most puristic works in our collection, designed by the Kinazan design team. The work is constructed in a traditional kaolin weave. This is a very dense weave, resulting in a quite thin but really strong work. Characteristic for this quality is that there is used a handspun yarn. This handspun yarn is on purpose spun irregularly, meaning that the yarn has different thicknesses. In this handmade quality, we honor the unique touch of the human hand, and this showing well in the intriguing and slight irregular surface of the work.
Carl Hansen & Son was founded in 1908 by my grandfather, Carl Hansen. Today we still produce in Denmark, and we are proud to say that we are the biggest producers of Wiener furniture in the world. When I took over the business in 2002, I had to build a whole new factory. We used the best material to build the factory from and had a state-of-the-art factory ready in about a year after I took over. Many people warned me for investing so much money into a factory in Denmark, but I did anyhow, because of the development of and all the craftsmanship you get here in Denmark for making furniture. Carpentry dates back more than hundreds of years, because we have handmade so many different products right from the Viking ships hundreds of years ago.
Hi, Nikolai.
Hi, Sophie.
So, what is this?
This is Plint.
Yeah?
It's designed by the Danish designer Cecilie Mans, and it's a generic piece of furniture. You can use it as a coffee table, or you can use it in your hallway, or anywhere you like in your home.
What is it made of?
First of all, it's certified with the EU flower, and then it's made of wood. It comes in 3 different species. This is Oregon pine, which has a quite dense structure. It also comes in Kalmar pine, which is a little bit lighter, and it comes in oak, which is darker.
Welcome to Kvik. My name is Claus Jonsen. I'm head of design at Kvik. For more than 37 years, Kvik has been challenging the market standard. We constantly ask ourselves the question, what if? What if we could do things more simple than the market standard? What if we could do things faster than the market standard? Or what if we could be more transparent than the market standards?
Hi and welcome. I'm Maya from Line Bjerre Design, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about this amazing company that I'm a part of. Line Bjerre Design is a Danish lifestyle brand that has a vision to create a mood in your room.
The people here at Virsabi and myself are so excited to be working with this technology, and we see such a big potential in it. My favorite part of this technology is the massive creative freedom that we can have, but also that we can suspend disbelief. We talked with the brands about how we can manipulate and play with time and lighting, as well as how we, for example, for one of the clients, we had an exploded view of an object. It's something that you wouldn't normally be able to do, but because of the LED screen behind us, we could just create a 3D environment and then place this item in there and actually animate it like that. If you have any questions about the technology that we use in the virtual studio at Virsabi, you're more than welcome to get in touch, and I will gladly answer all questions.
So that was Iris Magdalena Schmidt from Virsabi talking to us about their new virtual production studio. And we have Iris on the line now. We're going to go to Zoom. Hello, Iris.
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this presentation. And can you start, how long has the studio been open here?
Yeah, so we've had the studio, I think we built it just after the summer. It was one of those things where it was part of a project. So Virsabi, and I thought that was interesting for the audience to get some insight into how we use virtual production at Virsabi for exactly this project. It was also why I included some of the cases that we made and kind of cut between them just so people got an impression of the different things that we made. And I know the audience is interested in how virtual production is being used in Denmark.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what inspired you to open up this kind of studio here?
Well, I'm in the lucky position that I'm coming from the film industry and I have a background as a film director, and I get a lot of hands-on experience with virtual production at Virsabi. It's one of those things where I have some awesome and very passionate and talented colleagues at Virsabi, and we all, a lot of us were interested in virtual production. I have been following this. A lot of us also come from the film industry and have been following this technology for a while and really wanted to get our hands on this. So when we had this project that was funded by Industriens Fund that came to us and said, okay, well, we have these different Danish brands and we want to see how we can help with their export. It was a great opportunity for us to get this technology in there in a different way than what's used in the film industry. So it's not fiction, but we're still using the same technologies that we are working with on a day-to-day basis, because we do virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality. So we're already working with the game engines.
Okay.
It was just using that in a different way on the LED screen.
Cool. So it was basically just a natural progression of the stuff you were already doing. You just said, well, we have already got all the background for this, so why don't we get a studio up and running?
Yeah, and we have a lot of people. I mean, everything we do is in-house, so we have a lot of very talented people working on this sort of stuff. So we just thought it might as well. It's a great way to start working with this type of technology.
Yeah, cool. Do you have a vision for where you'd like to take it in the future? Do you have a sort of plan for it, or are you just happy to start it out and see where it goes?
I think, to begin with, because Virsabi does mostly business to business, it's a lot of, okay, how can we use this for marketing reasons? And we've already done some live sessions with brands, because it's Corona and we have people can't really travel. So we're slowly exploring what kind of, doing research into what kind of projects we can do with this. For me personally, I would love to get my hands on doing more virtual productions, because I still love fiction and I still love doing that sort of thing. And for anyone who's been to the ViZARTS conferences the last couple of years, they know, and the people who know me personally know that I can't shut up about this type of technology. I will post about it everywhere and try and get everyone on board, even if they're the traditional film people and DPs and editors, because I just think it's so interesting.
Yeah. So what is it that inspires you about it? So for you as a filmmaker, as on the artistic side of things, what is it that inspires you about it, and what do you think it brings to the Danish film production environment?
Well, for me, I think the technology, it's about using it to see and capture your vision as a film director. It's a new way to collaborate where we move a lot of things from post-production and it's moved into pre-production. And it allows collaborators to work together and ping pong in entirely new ways. I think it's also interesting that the technology democratizes what filmmakers can do, and the barrier to entry is kind of changing slowly and coming down. So it allows for us to kind of work on what type of stories we want to create and who can create them as well. So it might be one of those things where most people think they can't afford it, but honestly, Unreal's free. You just need a very strong computer, and then you can start working with this sort of thing and learning. There's so many tutorials online for people to start learning that sort of thing. And I think it's also about, I mean, we've talked about getting diversity into the film industry for a few years now, and I think it's one of those things where this is an entirely new field. And I think this technology can democratize the film industry, which would mean like a larger selection of stories being told by different people, and hopefully also more diversity.
Good. So now that the tools are more accessible, basically that lots of people can. Do you think it'll? I know I'll speak for myself, I guess. Coming in as an outsider, I know that it seems like the Danish industry is very focused on telling realistic stories, and the virtual production. Do you think the virtual production tools open up the possibilities for telling a wider range of genre that maybe wouldn't have been accessible in Denmark before, or is it? Yeah.
I think so. I think what's going to be interesting going forward is to see whether virtual production is going to change the core identity of Danish film. I mean, we're a country that's internationally known for a very specific type of film, which is, social realism and Nordic noir. But it's fascinating to see whether that's going to change over time now that new technologies emerge and that we can use them for different things. I mean, I'm personally, as a film director, not super interested in social realism. I'd rather do something that combines different technologies and that can kind of push the boundaries or maybe fuse one genre with the next. I don't think that Danish film will ever go up against Hollywood, because they have so much more money than we do, and that's also one of the reasons why the Danish film industry focused on kind of like becoming something different than Hollywood. But maybe like certain new genres will emerge, genres that are kind of like a fusion between kind of like I always think of virtual production as the film and the games industry combined, and I think that's what's happening with virtual production. So just fusing two genres to create a third hybrid would be interesting.
Yeah. Cool. We have a question from the audience here. Darren asks, what is the approximate footprint of the virtual stage in terms of depth and width in meters?
I know Michael, our other creative director at Virsabi, is also watching this. I think he can answer this better. But as far as I remember, it's 4 meters by 2.8.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Okay.
If that's what he means, the height, right?
I think that's what he was looking for, just the physical dimensions of it.
Yeah.
And we have another audience question from Anonymous. Probably not the organization or the non-affiliated organization Anonymous. Do you have any ideas for short films that could use that screen and technology?
Oh, definitely. I'm working on some myself. But I think what's interesting is using it to kind of change. I mean, the reason why I love virtual production is that I get to play with and experiment with time and space, and that's one of the reasons why I included some of the case videos that we saw in the video, was because what we did was we worked with, for example, time lapses. So the where could be a place where the production can't afford to go. That can be a country because we can't afford to travel right now because of Corona, or it could be like it's not physically possible, like outer space, we can't actually get there. And the time aspect would be, I think what's interesting is manipulating and controlling it through time lapses or like a constant sunset or something, because something that would never be possible in the real world, where you have 5 minutes to nail a shot because the sun simply isn't going to wait for you to set up properly and actually get the shot. But with this, there are so many new possibilities that makes, I think it's about this suspending disbelief. I think that's what really stronger than virtual production.
So you're almost talking about that the landscape itself and the setting and the lighting become manipulatable in a way that we're not used to them being manipulatable. Is that so that you can condense time or do those sorts of things in a, I hadn't thought about that, but that is actually a really cool idea. Then we have another audience one here, Anonymous again. How do you see the future of this in Denmark for filmmakers? Do you see it being easily available in the near future for smaller budget and indie projects?
I think so. I think the thing is, I come from a place where I studied abroad, so I think it's one of those things where I came to Denmark and I found out that in Denmark they think they want to do film a specific way, but I love technology and I love mixing the two. I call it the love triangle, and I did a presentation at ViZARTS last year where I think it's the best part where you combine. I mean, we have a really strong game industry, and we also have a really strong film industry, but they don't really talk together.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to help, to aid and help to democratize this technology, because it creates an interesting workflow for all of us that we're going to end up using. It's not the type of technology that fits every single project, so it's one of those things where you can't fit every project into this. It's about you should always think about the medium. But I think it's interesting to mix. What was the second part of the question?
It's disappeared from my screen.
Okay.
Oh wait, hang on.
If it's going to help indie films, right, or something like that.
Yeah. Do you see it being easily available in the near future for smaller budget indie projects?
I think so. I mean, of course, not everyone. I think as soon as people start working with sort of type of technology, and also the fact that we also have a conference that even is addressing this is amazing, because 3 years ago we didn't really. And it was one of those things that a few people had heard about it, but filmmakers hadn't really heard about it yet. I think it's also just filmmaking is a creative process, and I think as soon as people understand that we can collaborate in new ways, and it's really a way to help break down barriers and make it easier to communicate between departments. I mean, even the actors knowing what kind of landscape they're in is going to give them so much, instead of standing in front of a green or a blue screen or something.
Yeah.
And you can interact with something that isn't real, so like a monster on Mars or whatever, and it's not a tennis ball that you have to look at and react to. I think that's going to give a lot to the production.
Yeah. Demos asks, do you have plans to expand the number of walls or ceilings and the number of screens that you have on your set, or to expand it, I guess, into a wider room, I guess is the part of the question there.
I would love to. I mean, right now we created this studio because we could, and because the project was perfect for it. Right now we don't have physical space to actually expand, because the room is kind of like a loft type of place, so we can't actually expand even more. But it would be amazing, because it would also create some opportunities and some different shots that we couldn't actually do right now with the screen, because it's not the biggest, but it works for what we want to do.
Sure. And last question before we finish. Do you have any advice for if somebody is a filmmaker or just training or whatever, and they sort of want to have their first experiments or experience with virtual production using any of these techniques, or specifically the type of LED wall that you're using? Where would someone who wants to try it out for the first time, where would you suggest they begin?
I think the ViZARTS community is honestly one of the things that helped me learn more about what I wanted. And I came there going, okay, I'm a film director, I'm interested in this, but I don't know anything yet. I think also, I mean, I've learned a lot of stuff online, because there's a very strong community for virtual production online, and there's a lot of sharing of knowledge, which I think is also very important for us to actually keep evolving. And every time there is a type of creative project or research or even anything, people share it online. And there's a lot of support for just experimenting with it. So I would start with that.
Okay, cool. That's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much for your presentation and for joining us to talk for a bit.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Have a good night.
You too.
So that was Iris Magdalena Schmidt from Virsabi talking to us about their new virtual production studio here in Copenhagen. And now we have our final guests of the evening. This is Kenny DiGiordano, the virtual art department supervisor from Halon Entertainment, and Landis Fields, the virtual production visualization supervisor from Industrial Light and Magic. And they are here to talk to us about their work on Disney's The Mandalorian.
part of what's been fun about collaborating on The Mandalorian with Lucasfilm and Disney is that we have been able to see through a few technical innovations and a few firsts that I think are going to have a lot of impact on the way television and movies are made moving forward. In partnership with ILM and Epic, we have put together a system whereby which we can have game engine, real-time render, and video wall technology coming together to create a backdrop for the big, beautiful world of Star Wars.
The volume is 21 feet tall, it's 75 feet in diameter, run by 7 machines, pumping the visuals onto the screen that's being created in pre-production and can be on the screen within 24 hours of being finalized.
It's incredibly impressive when you first walk out there because it completely surrounds your peripheral vision. And you really quickly forget that you're indoors and you're not out on some planet's surface. It feels like a real three-dimensional environment surrounding you because it is a three-dimensional environment.
You can allow your key creatives to all make decisions together so that the shots are captured entirely in camera, which allows for a better performance.
And what was so exciting about this is by bringing those people together, things started to click. And we started to realize, well, let's not just do green screen and interactive light. If we're going to design the whole set and game engine ahead of time, maybe we could have some in-camera effects.
Everything in the volume is designed to both light the actors and to be a background that we can directly photograph. So you end up with real-time final pixels in camera.
If you look at visual effects heavy films, you've got a film set and then it's going to go to post and it's going to get the world put in. Here we're considering all of that at the same time, and how do we create a background and foreground that live together on the volume harmoniously.
When we started to play with the idea of using Unreal Engine for virtual production, that's one of the things that Richard and John started to embrace, is that you've got this very dynamic world where you can have randomization of things and find the happy accident that gives you the perfect shot. Being able to see the actors point at things and see what they're looking at was pretty transformative. It gave everybody context, with the added benefit that if you want to move a mountain from there to there, you can do it instantly.
You could switch between the Iceland location to the desert location, all within the same day of shooting.
The ability to shoot a 10-hour dawn is extraordinary. To shoot any sequence where you say, oh, this world's not quite right, let's just move it a little bit. An extraordinary number of benefits and advantages for shooting in that environment. It's mind-blowing what that tool is.
What you see is really what you get. And that's something that really means a lot to filmmakers, especially those who have worked with a more traditional approach in the past.
Shots of character in a vehicle traveling through a complex environment. It's always very difficult to do believably on stage. LED screens are a wonderful solution to that problem, because what you're doing is you're taking this technique of image-based lighting that we've been using in computer graphics for years, and use it to light a subject.
And then we would do shoots where we would texture map real lit surfaces onto our game engine Geo, and so the camera could move anywhere. We would do interiors, like Werner Herzog's office. And then you started doing things like building sets into it, having half a spaceship with reflective surfaces. And so it became exciting because by the end of the season, it was like, let's start designing sets around what this could do well.
Just like the good old days. With Star Wars, we're building on a rich legacy of innovation, and getting to partner with Jon Favreau to make his ambitious vision a reality, it's really a game changer for filmmaking.
Great, so that was a short video on Disney's The Mandalorian, and we're now going to go straight to a Zoom conversation with Kenny DiGiordano from Halon Entertainment and Landis Fields from Industrial Light and Magic. Hello, Landis and Kenny, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Hi. I'm just going to introduce myself quickly. My name is Alex. I'm the host for this evening here at ViZARTS. And yeah, I'm an actor. That's how I got roped into all this stuff. It's fantastic to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, it's hard to put into words the impact that the work that you're doing on The Mandalorian has had. It's you know, in a way the production techniques that you're using are kind of they're as big as the show itself. It feels like a shot heard around the world in some ways. People here are definitely taking notice. A bunch of LED screen studios have popped up just in the last year. So the work that you're doing is clearly having a very immediate impact. You've really inspired people. So it's just fantastic to have a chance to talk to you. So we wanted to ask, because you have the attention of the Danish industry here, and because you know you're learning so much about this process that you're working with, what do you have any information for Danish directors, cinematographers, VFX people on what your experience has been like working with this new type of production, and how it's going to change traditional workflows and that kind of thing?
Kenny, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'll let you ask me. Clean up my mess, basically. I think like they should just embrace it. I mean, everything that is coming with full force. So I think that like you know, in a lot of ways the lines are kind of starting to blur a little bit in how all this stuff is coming together between the pre-production, the post-production, you know, and just being able to have all these extra new tools at our fingertips is, I don't know, it's amazing. I had a lot of fun just coming from like the previs world and being able to, you know, implement a lot of that stuff that I've learned in the pre-production process and previs to help apply that into the virtual art department on The Mandalorian, and, you know, just be able to, you know, go through all the different iterations and, you know, work with the art department and start to see this stuff really come to life on screen. It's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to piggyback on what Kenny said. What's really great for upcoming directors and DPs and everybody, all the key creatives, is this is one of the most. This is a huge turning point for storytelling, cinema, everything. And it's the tools that we're using for you know, The Mandalorian and other shows for virtual production. It allows everyone to come together in this really super collaborative way that has never been really possible before. So what I see it from, you know, the background that I've been lucky enough to have is you get to see folks all at the table at the same time having a conversation. Whereas in the past, it used to be these siphoned off, like gated reviews. But now you'll all be in the VR headset from anywhere in the world, and you've got the director in there, the DP in there, production designer, VFX supervisor, and we're all flying around and making decisions together. So it's great.
Yeah, cool. It seems like it's been kind of a change of pace for some people. I've heard some other talks talking to animators and then digital environment people talking about how they used to spend their time after the shoot, you know, sitting by themselves, you know, just sort of working on it in their own time, to suddenly being thrown into the frying pan of a you know, fast-paced film set. So it seems like for some people their job description is really getting shaken up. Is that right?
You know, I don't know if I'd say that it's really getting too shaken up, just because of like the experience that, you know, everybody has kind of going into it. You know, you know, in the film industry, it is really fast-paced, but for the most part, like you've learned so much along the way that allows you to just apply those principles and, you know, time management skills and all that stuff, just to make sure that, you know, you're getting the job done. Obviously, working with you know, ILM and everybody right there in the visual effects department, like we're pushing the boundaries as far as we can in the VAD, just to be able to get like a nice visual up on screen. The use of Unreal Engine has been, you know, probably the biggest game changer of everything, just to be able to have all that real-time environment stuff happening, you know, just live, like I said, with everybody, to make the changes on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like it's shaking it up in a. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Continue.
I was just gonna say, Alex. You know, if anything, I think it's shaking it up in a good way. We have tons of existing talent, directors, everybody out there, animators, but everyone, including people who have had years and years of experience as model makers for building miniatures and that. What I think this has done is it's kind of injected new life in a collaborative team way to this. So, some of the ways that we're working now are actually using more physical builds and more miniatures. Yes, we scan those, we bring them into Unreal, we scout them in VR. But what's cool about that is I think it's shaken up the industry in that way. It's basically giving a bunch of master chefs the opportunity to kind of learn to cook in a new kitchen with all the tricks that they've got.
Yeah, awesome, cool. And what would you recommend for talking about the Danish film context here? A lot of times budgets are going to be a lot smaller than the ones you're working with in Hollywood. We might be working with an inertial-based motion capture system versus an optical one, for instance, or we might have, a sort of a smaller screen than the massive set that you have for the Mandalorian. Everything's going to be a bit sort of scaled down in a virtual production context. What advice do you have for Danish filmmakers here working with those tools to kind of jump in and get started Yeah,
I think for the most part, it's a lot of pre-planning, especially if things aren't as big. We had a really big volume, I guess, so we had a huge luxury there. But when it comes down to planning what's going to be in camera, the use of previs obviously comes into play a lot, and then being able to pre-plan all that stuff. I know I'm kind of tripping over my own words here for a second, but the pre-planning is obviously the biggest thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of like the technical stuff you were mentioning with the IMU suits and that, at the end of the day, and I know this sounds very cliche, what's really cool about this stuff and the virtual production as a whole right now, which I know is a very big, vague thing when you mention virtual production, is that it's another way of everybody basically failing as fast as they can. Get in there, test things out, and Previs has been doing this for years. All of these different workflows. I mean, I think anybody getting into this now, it's exciting because you don't have to have a super expensive IMU suit. You can get a very inexpensive IMU suit. That's a real thing that people can have in their spare bedroom of their apartment or whatever. Same goes with VCam. It used to be this very expensive thing. Now you can do VCam right off the shelf in Unreal with a plugin. So I think and obviously there are varying degrees and varying calibers of that type of stuff. But what I think is really exciting to filmmakers right now is the democratization of some of those filmmaking tools to get people started, and then they can grow into it and take it as far as they want. But you don't have to. If you're starting out and you're a student, you can really get your feet wet in some of these virtual production techniques.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and the fact that the Unreal Engine is free, I mean, that's really what's inspiring everybody to jump into it. And just the power that it has, and just being able to see everything like I said on the fly. I can't believe that they give it away to the world for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, oh, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
No, really, go on.
I was just going to say, honestly, I mean, I know a lot of people, just as I did when I was first starting out, get enamored in what the big guys use. You're always looking at like, oh, I need this giant LED wall, I need all this stuff. And there's a world for that stuff for sure. But at the end of the day, I think what's really powerful is just getting in there and learning these things. Because truth be told, even, and this is kind of a message, I guess, to like more experienced folks out there, but a lot of directors who have been doing this for years and DPs and that are looking, production designers who are looking to get into this are probably thinking, oh, this is a whole new thing. And this is like a bunch of kids behind computers that make video games. It's actually quite the opposite. I think it's what it is really right now is there are techniques for us to invite and be flexible to and embrace all of the people regardless of their experience. So if we've got a person who wants to work on the wheels for a DP to or use a focus pulling mechanism, any of those things, there's ways of having all of that stuff communicate with the suite of tools that we use. So I would sway against anybody. I guess the message that I'm trying to get across there is I'd sway against anybody being persuaded by one specific thing or another, thinking, oh, if I learn this tool, then it's going to hurt me later. I think just get in there and get comfortable using the mindset of it versus getting caught up in any of the technical aspects of it. Because sometimes when you're starting out, especially, and I've been victim of it, the tools can become greater than the thing you're trying to do, and you become too precious with it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I did this thing and I want to switch it up and I want to do it in here, and it's very easy to fall into that. Or this new mocap suit came out, maybe I should do it in there. But yeah, use what you have access to.
That's always a good message. We're going to take a question from our online audience now. Madav asks, in the VFX side of things, what was the biggest challenge to overcome in virtual production early on? And do you see difficulties in work changing from post-production to pre-production?
I'll jump on this one. So I think one of the biggest challenges for everybody, not just for visual effects, when we first set out to do this, and I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but a good deal of the technology out there had existed, from all over the place. So ILM had done a bunch of stuff in years past with ingredients that make up what we do on The Mandalorian today. And there are other things that's standing on the shoulders of different giants, not just stuff that we've done at ILM, but what I think what really came together is having somebody like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, who were really like visionaries and helping us kind of bring this stuff together. And they entrusted everybody to get a bunch of smart folks in the room and say, this is what we want to achieve, and let's try to figure it out. It's very much like, a lot of the amazing stories you hear of things like that in all industries. And when we started to set out to tackle that monumental task, we had a couple challenges ahead of us. And yes, it's for visual effects, but it was for everybody. One was just getting stuff up on the wall, on that LED wall, having it be performant enough to where we could freely trick out any of the scenes and environments that we want, and making these crazy designs and being able to whip pan really fast handheld and have it keep up with the camera for some. There's technical aspects there. There's technical aspects just for like performance alone. And all of the tech of the masterminds, and I don't even want to pretend to speak for the folks that are working on like end display and all of those things, just to get the tech to play performant on the wall, not even anything to do with the actual creative aspect of what is being displayed. But also a big one is, and this kind of falls in line with the visual effects aspect, is getting the Star Wars franchise, keeping that bar and keeping up with the pace of streaming and episodic, and doing that in a timely manner, but keeping that visual bar. That was a huge task that I think is often overlooked. I mean, we couldn't come out and have this just look okay. The fans deserve something that is just as good if you went in the theater, or if not better. And we wanted to be able to rapidly bang those things out and have enough creative flexibility in prep, but also in VFX and on the day when we shoot on the LED wall. So there is a lot of tests, and it honestly it was tackled by everybody teaming up together. Even a VFX task was when we have meetings, we have these methodology meetings, and everybody's present. The visual effects supervisor's present, the director, production designer, everyone, and we work together to try to set ourselves up for success. So that's the key takeaway from all this stuff is visual effects challenges. We look at those as it's everyone's challenge. We're trying to set the show up for success. So if we can fabricate something physical that's scenic and have that be in the foreground and push the rest digital, if that makes it the best solution for all of us, then that's what we go with, versus, oh, well, I built my stuff and that's all owed by VFX. You know what I mean? You can't work that way these days with these new workflows. Everybody has to be hand in hand and work together, which I actually love. I think that's the best part of it.
Yeah, it definitely makes it much more collaborative, Landis, for sure. Because I've been a part of a lot of productions over the last 10 years, and this one was definitely the biggest collaboration. Just to be able to have everybody in that same room, and like you said, the directors come in, the DPs come in, and production designer, we make these decisions, and then we implement those decisions right away. And just be able to go down and test it on the volume pretty much that afternoon, was a huge help too.
Yeah. Sorry, we just had a technical glitch here. We have another question from the audience. Star Wars asks, we know that The Mandalorian is one of the most expensive shows on television these days. How much more time would you imagine would have to pass before a show like yours would get cheaper to produce?
I can't really speak to the actual cost, but what I can say is one thing that's been very humbling and inspiring, actually, to be a part of this process is, and I don't know if you guys have heard of some of these terms, but we call it in-camera finals. So in-camera finals is essentially when you get a shot over the shoulder. Let's say Kenny and I are chatting, and we're inside of a cantina or something. Some insert any Star Wars set here, and we're doing an over-the-shoulder chat back and forth, boom, 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 and you've got that background and all of the lighting. And oh, by the way, one of our main characters in the show just happens to be wearing essentially an HDR eyeball on his head. It's just this reflective sphere. So anything, like if there's glasses on I'm using a case of a bar, if there's glasses on the bar and they're getting kicks and highlights, all of that stuff you're getting for free. There's a great deal of shots we get that are done. They're done. There's no going to visual effects and doing some stuff. Now we do have obviously a huge share of shots that we do have to do varying degrees of fixes. We've got tech fixes that are little things like erasing out little Vicon cameras and stuff if we, or the optical mocap cameras if we see one in view of the stage, little things like that. But when you've, a lot of people look at the upfront like challenges of setting up a volume show, and it seems a little daunting at first, which we have teams of people to help folks get situated with that when they're looking to tell a story with the volume. But there's a lot of people who've never heard of Perforce before. And, for setting up and pushing and pulling assets between previs and VAD and all that, there's a lot of things that are unusual to folks who are very, very well versed in film and television. So it can look a little scary, but when you start to enjoy the fruits of all that labor on the day, and you're getting shot after shot in the can, and your actors, and you'll appreciate this, Alex, being a performer, the actors aren't standing in front of a green screen looking at a tennis ball, imagining that that's like some villain. It's like, no, we have the stuff. We have animated loads playing. You're getting reflections. Everyone's eye lines are looking at the right spot. That's gold. You can't put a price on that. And when you're showing early versions of editorial to folks, it's not like this mishmash of OpenGL previs and a green screen shot here, and you're kind of trying to imagine what the story is. You're looking at first passes out of editorial, and it looks great. I mean, you can tell the story. You see the story right there. So that's the kind of stuff that once people get into this and they see cost-wise or however you want to put it, when you start getting all that payoff in the back end, you're just getting shots on the can. It's like I said, you just can't put a price on that. It's beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah, I think in terms of making it cheaper for everybody too, it's just embracing the new technology that is coming out. Not everybody has, the capability of, creating something in Unreal like we did in the VAD and then sending it over to ILM to basically final all those assets and get everything, looking, top notch on screen. But there's so much stuff that's, coming out these days that just individual artists are out there making in the world. And, that's the kind of stuff that if you can go out and, rent an LED wall or something like that, maybe this stuff starts to become a little bit more affordable and you're not trying to build all this stuff on your own. Again, I can't stress enough the pre-planning of everything. We've recently done a production to where, the director wants to swing the camera, 90 degrees that way, but you're like, you can't do that because the screen is there. You'd have to go through like a complete reset, maybe in the live action part of the stage to rotate something to actually get that shot that you would want. So yeah, I mean, working with Andrew Jones on in the VAD and the art department, he would set up things and give us specific tasks of, okay, just make sure how many shots can we get here in this volume. So then that way, you're doing things out of order, and you usually do that in the film industry anyways, but just to pre-plan that and say, all right, here's the 5 shots we're going to get here, reset the stage, and then turn around and then get 5 more shots, So again, just embrace the technology and, make sure that the talent that you're getting in there is stuff that you want. The stuff that's going to be coming out with like Unreal Engine 5, that demo was pretty amazing. So if, it becomes a little bit more less restrictive, I guess, as an artist too, moving forward. So, who knows what people are going to start producing, photogrammetry world, all that stuff. It's super useful. And just to get that realism inside an Unreal Engine that's free, take it, do it.
Yeah, and what Kenny's saying, Alex, real quick, I'll just tag one last thing onto that. What I love about what Kenny's saying, and obviously him and I echo a lot of things all the time, even off of these calls, is no matter how cheap you try to get any of these processes, it comes down to education and people being comfortable, so that if you plan, like Kenny's saying, if you embrace more of the planning aspect of this, that's where you get a lot of savings. To echo what Kenny said about Andrew Jones, he's an amazing production designer. He actually was like one of the best aspects of the show in that he is kind of a hybrid. He's because a lot of production designers are self-proclaimed pencil and paper production designers. They're more like they draw schematics literally on pencil and paper, which is amazing. And then they'll have a counterpart with them, kind of a partner in crime, who will do a lot of the digital aspects. Andrew's one of those guys who can do both. So not only is Andrew drawing out set designs that for fabrication, and he's done that himself with his hands, but he also can throw things into Maya, bang them out, send them over to Unreal, put on a VR headset. I mean, he's like a superhero production designer. So, which everybody on our show was. But when you have a team that really embraces that prep, like Kenny's saying, that's where you can really benefit from reusal, being efficient, just thinking like theater. Like, do I really need to build the whole room if the guy's just leaning against the wall? Maybe we just owe the wall scenic. Stuff like that is where you really get your savings. I mean, you can noodle down other costs, but just embracing that prep time and getting everybody in there sooner than later, that's where you get huge efficiencies.
Cool. Thank you. And that person, Star Wars, has a second question as well. What is a timeline on a regular Mandalorian episode divided into pre-production, production, and post-production? I imagine that pre-production now takes up most of the time.
Yeah, I feel like pre-production is definitely one of the biggest cases. I mean, I think we started pre-production months ahead of time and just building the sets and stuff and getting it ready for the volume. And as Landis was saying earlier, all the different tests that even had to go into this process to make sure that, it was going to work when we showed up on the day. That was the big what if, and all of a sudden it was just like, wow, it's working. This is amazing. Yeah. The first test that, we ever saw was just like, a scan of like a photogrammetry room, or a scan that we did, use photogrammetry to rebuild that room and then turn around and put that up on the LED wall. I walked in one day and saw some, stormtroopers leaning up against the wall. And I was like, wait, are they against the wall? No, they were actually just sitting down on a chair. So it was really cool to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard to get, and I hate when people answer me the way I'm going to answer this question, is it all depends. It's varying complexities of sets, and not just on The Mandalorian. I mean, Kenny can speak to other shows that he had been on. He was on, I know this panel's about Mandalorian, but Kenny's done Call of the Wild and other shows who have used similar techniques leading up to this big 800-pound gorilla workflow that we have now. But it all is varying. There's how much, basically when we have that methodology meeting, we start to deem what we want to shoot on the LED wall and I know that's the hot thing that everybody wants to talk about, but we also will coordinate like, hey, we'll have a couple shots on the LED wall. We'll maybe do some on the back lot. We'll maybe go to a location and shoot at that location. We might send a team out to a location and capture that location. And then in terms of scans and that, bring that back, scale it up and put it up on the wall. So that whole push and pull of what is the right tool for the job is what really determines the schedule and the savings that previous question was. Each task is a different task. There's no silver bullet, and that's why these virtual production workflows are so powerful. Is that you just kind of face it head on, and you look at everything. You break down the script together. You look at the concept art if there's any. You work hand in hand with locations managers and try to find real places that we can go use. Build miniatures if we need to help augment it. So it's a huge collaborative team effort to work. And we also do some workflows now too, where we think about the future. And what I mean by that is if we build a set physically, we will also capture that so that we have it for reshoots, those kind of things. So there's a lot of things that impact the schedule that don't normally when you do start introducing an amazing tool such as the volume.
Yeah, cool. Our next question is from Henrik. It's another two-part question. I'll ask you the first part first. How can young talents educate themselves to work in the field of virtual production and real-time filmmaking?
I guess the easiest thing is the internet. There's countless tutorials up there, and with the virtual production world that has been expanding the way that it has, everybody's jumping into it. And a lot of people coming from a traditional Maya pipeline and full on, third-party renderers and things like that they're using to actually produce the workflows. They kind of got to get a new mindset if they're going to switch over to the Unreal side of things. Obviously, there's new materials to dive into. There's different settings that maybe they're not used to. I see a lot of questions that pop up about best ways to optimize scenes and things like that. But I think that's where they should really start is obviously jumping into tutorials and just getting hands-on. We hire a lot of people even that come in that have never touched the Unreal Engine. It's one of our primary uses at our studio for everything that we do, from game cinematics to previs to everything. And we've basically just come up with this whole training pipeline and getting people up to speed like as fast as we can. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff to catch on to, but I feel like they grasp it pretty quick, especially coming from some of the backgrounds that they have. So it's been a helpful tool for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, and something to kind of extend what Kenny's saying is, aside from all of the training that you can get online and that, one of the things that I'll say that Richard Bluff mentioned in another conversation during VS, and it's something that Kenny has done, I know, in his past, and myself, is try to look at all of this stuff holistically. Like when I went to school, there was a big push to just being a modeler or just being a texture artist or just being an animator, and that's fine. There's a need for that specialization. But when you start to dabble in these types of things like virtual production, I mean, like Kenny's first animation student reel thing that he showed me one day, we were sharing student stuff, and he had done everything. He had this whole character running and all this. Now, looking at that as a more seasoned professional, you would know, like, oh yeah, it's obvious Kenny's story. He would lead into previs and all this virtual production stuff, looking back on that. But a lot of schools, even today, it's a little bit more familiar today to schools, but especially back when I was going, it looked reckless if you were trying to do a lot of different things. So I would say if you're getting into this, have a holistic understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve, not just one pigeonholed thing. So understand cameras, that's a big one. A solid understanding of an actual camera is a big deal. Just having your own camera, even if it's a phone and you can't afford a nice DSLR or whatever, but just that's a huge thing. And of course, real time, all of that stuff, but just understanding what it is when you're trying to make a film or a shot or a TV show or an experience or whatever, just the whole thing, how everybody thinks. Think like a director, think like a DP, think like a production designer, set decorator. Because if you get into this world of it, you interface with all of those folks. When you're in a VAD, you have sessions one-on-one with a set decorator. And that set decorator is a very specialized person who tells a story through set dressing inside of an environment, just like your background, Alex. You got the fire going, you got some logs, like it's a red chair. All of those little things are things that the production designer and set decorator think about all the time. But if you can understand all of that and what the actors will want, and giving some environment interesting, undulations so that the stunties can jump up and jump off some stairs and fight. Having a solid understanding of all those things will just make you so much more valuable, and it's almost essential in what we're doing.
So a really broad knowledge, basically. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, just real quick backstory. Like I started out as just an animator, and then moved into the rest of, all aspects of everything, like getting animation, the background, modeling, texturing, all that stuff. So I didn't know any of that, then it comes down to the, comp elements too, to where you got to start actually comping things to make things look a little bit better. Just being able to learn all that stuff and, make yourself, as Landis would call you, a ninja, because you can do everything at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely good knowledge, Landis.
Yeah, and every single person, I don't know how pressed we are for time. Every single person on our show is like that. Everyone, not just in the VAD. I should specify. I mean, Richard Bluff, our visual effects, our main client-side visual effects supervisor, he's incredible. He's a generalist, and he actually used to run entire shots on his own. He wasn't just a matte painting guy. All the way up to like Filoni. Filoni can sit there, and Filoni has an animation background. So when he enters the room with previs, he doesn't just sit there and use his hands and say, imagine a guy comes in a door. He will set on a dry erase board. It's incredible. And he will block out the entire storyboard of the entire sequence. He has it all blocked in his head. Cameras, everything. We're going to cut to an over the shoulder here. We're going to do an establishing shot here. And when he's done, he's just storyboarded the whole thing. It's incredible. Jon Favreau, all the way up to Jon Favreau. I mean, Jon is probably the closest thing, and this is going to sound crazy, but when you've had the luxury of working with Jon, he's probably the closest thing we have to Walt Disney today. He knows everything. He understands and has an appreciation for the technology, for the storytelling aspect. He's a performer himself. He's acted. And he writes. And so you can see all the way through the ranks of every person. They all do more than one thing. And I think it's it comes through in the product because everyone is conscious of one another. It's not just your one thing that you're focusing on, not just a previs artist or whatever.
So it really is it's not just a little bit collaborative. It sounds like it's massively intertwined collaboration.
Yeah, and it has to be. It has to be. When working with other shows, that's probably the first thing that I always start talking about is how it's in everyone's not just best interest, but if you want to be successful, everybody needs to be present for the scouts in the VAD. You want the DP has to be there because the other people will make a decision of something that can affect the lighting. You might say, hey, I like this really cool wall. Yeah, we've decided that the production designer is going to owe that wall physically on the day. And the visual effects supervisor said, yep, that's going to work for me. We can do a set extension out the window. But if the DP is not present to say, I can't get practicals on that wall, practical lights on that wall to throw far enough, or that light is going to spill up onto the volume. That's why it's so imperative. And again, my favorite part is having everybody present and collaborating and weighing in all in real time. So it all comes back to that with the prep and having visual effects involved. If you're using ILM, having ILM involved in with previs and everybody has to be present.
Awesome. The second part of Henrik's question was how much do you use programmers versus how much do you use turnkey software?
That's a good question. I feel like there's always things that can be improved upon with the turnkey software. So there's always a way to still get it done, with a basic package. Anything you can do to save time and be more efficient, click less buttons, all that stuff is totally useful. So to have a TD or just somebody that can program and write tools and C++, all that stuff. So many times where I was looking to make my job easier, I hit up one of the guys over at ILM and just be like, hey, can you get this tool and get this embedded back into the projects that we have that stuff to use? And again, like these are people that aren't always like in the same room with you, but you get introduced to them, virtually. And this is before COVID. So, we're, still, working with people up in, San Francisco or something like that while we're down in Los Angeles. And a few times those people would come down so you can actually get a face-to-face with them. So just tools are super important. And like I said, anything that makes the job get done faster is much more efficient, especially in our timelines that we have, to where if we only have 2 weeks to get something done before turnover, we're obviously not trying to kill ourselves by working a ton of overtime. So yeah, the programmers I think are super valuable. We need more.
Yeah, programmers are amazing. I mean, the person that pops in my head is not really a programmer. He's more of like a technology supervisor. He kind of, it helps engineer the pipeline. Is Owen Kaneen. And I believe he's actually done talks with you guys in the past. But Owen's great. He helps provide a flexible work environment so we can use the right tool for the job. And that's, a lot of folks always wonder and ask questions about Unreal, and they ask questions about ILM, Stagecraft, and that. But the answer is we use everything. We use off-the-shelf software, and if we have something that we can't do with the off-the-shelf software, or we need, and it's no knock to that specific software. It's just some things we need to do are a result of the creative ask, so we build it. And that's what's so powerful about the Stagecraft process is it includes Unreal, it includes everything, all the different packages that you could list them off for hours, so that we are successful on the day. It's definitely not a technocracy where we have to use this, that, or the other. I'd say the biggest takeaway from the whole Stagecraft LED volume approach is it's flexible for any filmmaker or any storyteller that wants to come in, whether you're doing commercials or whether you're doing TV shows or movies. You come in and you help break down and meet with the folks, and they'll tell you how to integrate the way you like to work, the best way that we can. So a lot of times that involves writing code to help glue things together, or leveraging existing code that we've already done, because of course we've done a lot of that already. But if there's some special way that somebody likes to work, that's again one of the things that I love. It's like, oh wow, let's figure out how to allow this person to give them the means to work the way they want to work. I think that's so cool, versus saying, hey, here's a mouse, you need to learn how to pull focus with a mouse, or it's silly stuff like that. And that's where people like Owen really shine. They're like the unsung heroes in a lot of this stuff.
Cool. So there's room for a lot of different working methods, possibly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Where do you see virtual production in the television and film industries going in the future? And I think maybe there's two different prongs to that. One could be, where do you see the like top end of the technology going in the next few years? And then do you have any thoughts on how the availability and the democratization of technology at the lower end is going to change that sort of end of the industry?
Kenny, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think virtual production, it's been being used for such a long time already that I don't think too many people realize that the things that we have been doing in the past is virtual production. One of the things that has kind of set the bar for virtual production has been, Mandalorian. But prior to that, I remember seeing videos for like AR wall and things like that were some of the first like screen tests that you're like, oh my God, this screen test is going to be amazing. And, the technology, but even just going back like to, other shows that were doing it, everybody's been shooting on a virtual stage with a 3D camera anyways, getting stuff laid out, on set, and, we're just replacing all that stuff in the green screen VFX afterwards. So yeah, I mean, I don't see it going anywhere. It's definitely just going to get better, and the use of the LED walls, again, are game changers, and that stuff's just going to get better. It's going to grow. Pretty soon everybody will have a Mandalorian stage, but in the meantime, everybody's just kind of working their way up to it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy actually. If you look at the lineage of how we got here, it's pretty telling of where things are going. I mean, there's actually an example out there, and I thought it was wrong when I first heard about it, of ILM used Unreal years ago on the movie AI to help do some virtual production techniques and and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
In real time on some of the sets. That was long before we started hearing cool things of AR walls, this, that, and the other. And then you've got folks like Greg Fraser, who is a huge pioneer, director of photography. Him and Baz, they pushed a lot of stuff forward. Greg did a lot of stuff on Rogue One with getting interactive lighting from walls for like some of the hyperspace stuff in that inside of cockpits. So, I mean, when you look at the lineage of how we got here, it's pretty telling of where it's going. I think being even more flexible is a thing with the not just with the ray tracing, the leaps that we've made with NVIDIA, with RTX cards and that, so that we can do a lot of stuff just on the fly live and with ray tracing. We're doing a lot of that now, but also taking advantage of a lot of machine learning techniques and that that stuff is going to help give us the boost over the edge that we couldn't have done 5 years ago if somebody presented the recipe. You know, it's all kind of arrived at this point. But I think the biggest thing is going to be even more flexibility, but in the right places. A lot of folks always will, you know, real quick, I'll jump on this little derail. A lot of folks will always say like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if you just could show up on set and do anything you want? Yes, that's a thing. But at the same time, that's very reckless. If you talk to any real professional creative, no one wants to show up and just figure it out when you have talent there and everything. So prep's not going anywhere, to what Kenny's point was. But what would be nice is, you know, as a lot of directors say, when they show up in the volume and they start shooting for the first time, after you've went through the whole VAD process and virtual production process on a stagecraft show, and you show up to shoot on the day, it almost feels like you're doing a reshoot, a lot of directors will say, because they've already explored the space in VR. They're familiar with it. They've already lensed the shots with the director, the DP. So they're familiar with it. But then it would be just giving them more flexibility to plus some things out, which we have already. But we're already building on it and becoming more ambitious, basically. We're our own worst enemies. Every time we get all the toys that we needed, we then are like, wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we did that? You know, that's how we got here. And that's a testament a lot to John as well, to Jon Favreau. He's always pushing us, and the fans love it. We're always trying to outdo ourselves.
Cool. I want to ask, go back to something you were talking about earlier. You're talking about the importance of having everyone together and conversation and collaboration. And then, of course, Kenny brought up that it was, you know, we're in coronavirus times. So how are you handling that? How has the pandemic and the shutdowns and that sort of thing affected that collaborative working process? And how are you guys working around it and stuff like that?
Alex, I'm glad you asked that, because there's not a day that goes by that I don't mention to one of my friends or someone at work where I feel like if this pandemic would have happened to let's just look at our industry, not just the world, but if this pandemic would have happened 10 years ago, I feel like we're all barely equipped to do these clunky Zoom calls at the caliber that we all have tried to do. I don't want to say it happened at a perfect time, but we were just all as humans barely prepared for that. And part of that is this whole workflow that we've developed with virtual production and stagecraft and going out to locations and capturing locations and putting them on the LED volume. It almost kind of set us up to reinvent ourselves when the pandemic hit. So, you know, when we used to do scouts, we could always do a scout and have somebody come in remotely, but we never did. We always had it be where all the creatives, we'd come in a room and we'd sit down and everybody puts a bunch of VR headsets on and we're all chatting in there. We got a big TV. That's just the way we did it because we were all on set doing it that way. Well, now, just like everything, right, it's opened up, I think, our minds a little bit to how this could be done even more efficiently and more creatively. So I think the volume went for almost overnight. I feel like the volume went from a thing that all of us on this call and everybody watching thought was really cool to almost a necessity for a lot of storytellers. A lot of people were like, if I want to go tell a story right now during a pandemic, this might be my only option, is using the volume. And not only is it their only option, but it introduces them to how I think this stuff is going to be in the future. If they want to go to Hawaii, they don't have to send the whole crew to Hawaii. We bring up Hawaii on the LED wall. Boom, you're in Hawaii. You want to go to Iceland? We pop up Iceland. We fly in some rock walls and stuff, and now you're in Iceland. So that's the kind of stuff that I think the pandemic has highlighted that we've kind of achieved. And it in a weird way, you're almost kind of proud that we got to that point when this happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Cool.
My mute was on, sorry.
That's all right.
I was saying I agree with Landis just in the sense that with 5 years ago, you know, this would have been a whole different story. But these days, you know, internet speeds are getting faster, you know, being able to have the collaboration of, you know, having 20 people on a Zoom call if you do need to discuss a bunch of creatives, or, you know, or even modify all the creatives that are happening, you know, being able to jump in and maybe there's, you know, a socially distanced, you know, mocap shoot where you have people over in the, you know, one person in the volume, another person, running the computer, and another person, running reference camera or something like that. But you have 3 people that maybe would normally take maybe, let's say 6 to 10, and you can get a lot more done, pre-COVID, but now you're still able to do it. You can have people watching the mocap shoot live. You can do directing, of all that stuff, from, your living room if you wanted to. So I think it's been pretty efficient actually. And I kind of wish it would have happened a lot sooner, not COVID, but being able to work from home. It's been like a godsend, so I can't thank that enough.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was trying to touch on too, Kenny. It's like, you don't ever want to say, obviously you're thankful for this crazy thing. You're almost just, it's like, I can't believe that we were all prepared in this weird way. It wasn't what we were trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. It was just a byproduct of this. And I don't know for a lot of folks watching this right now, if they understand, but like if pre-LED wall and pre this whole workflow that we do, you absolutely 10 years ago could have just done a bunch of previs in Maya or whatever and just had it be throwaway, send that stuff over to VFX. They would use what they could out of it. And some of it would be great, some of it wouldn't be, and yada, yada, yada. But for various reasons right now, without COVID, the whole, for me, the core at what makes virtual production truly virtual production is you're using the things that those creative decisions become the bones of what actually becomes the final stuff. It's not just throwaway. It's not just concept art. When we're in VR and we're scouting these sets, it's a mix between design, it's a mix between previs, it's a mix between tech biz. It's very filmmaker oriented. So we're pulling up, camera rigs and real film back. All of that stuff is in the engine. So when we're pulling up scenic set pieces that we're going to have fabricated on the day that made out of styrofoam or whatever. So if you were in a world before COVID, and I know this from filmmakers that have experienced the way we work, and then you go back to the way, which wasn't very long ago, how we did things, it almost feels like you took a step back like 100 years. Yeah. You almost, and I've used this term a couple times, but you almost feel reckless when you don't have these tools that we're using after you've experienced them. You feel like you're making ill-informed decisions about the shoot on the day. Yeah. Whereas we've got it now dialed in to where you just get addicted to collaborating and having everyone in there. And when you move something, I see it being moved. If you move a wall, I see it. Kenny sees it. He can weigh in on it and say, you know what? I think if we bring this ceiling down, and that scene is then saved, and that becomes the thing that we progress forward with versus, oh, I went and visited the previs guys, they're using Maya. Oh, I went and visited these guys. We don't, on our show, we don't have the luxury of doing that. We have to move fast. So yeah, and it just helps in COVID tremendously.
Yeah, cool. So a little bit of serendipity going on in terms of where you were. Nice. I think we have time for one last question. This question is, would this new pipeline not create a lot of unemployment for traditional filmmakers and crews?
Yeah, Landis.
Hey, you want to go first?
We were talking about this yesterday on our quick little call. But in our eyes, from what we've experienced, I haven't seen a drop in anywhere in production. If anything, it's just making the production more efficient. So again, it just comes down to reducing costs and what are the best ways to do that. But you still have all your traditional people there, and if anything, you have more people on the technology side now because you have to have the people that are at that brain bar, running everything and being able to change stuff on the fly for the guys that are on stage. So I don't see it going anywhere. I think it's been just as thriving, and it's actually inspiring people even a lot more too, just because they have these new tools available, and I think more people want to get involved. So yeah, I think people don't have to worry about their jobs anytime soon.
Yeah, I think if anything, and I know I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning, I'm sure a lot of folks by now have seen the Razor Crest making of that we did, the motion control rig for the miniature spaceship on the Mandalorian. There 100% has been a kind of an awakening with all of that stuff. We're using more than we were before. But what I think is exciting is we approach them differently. So before, if you were going to build a miniature, right, you'd have a team of guys come in, and the artists would all build the like a section that you were going to shoot, because you're going to shoot that miniature. What we do now is we approach it efficiently. We'll say, for example, on season 1, we had this whole hut that you went into that was a bar, the Sorgen hut. And I think it was called the Sorgen Common House. And what we did for that, it was kind of if you can imagine like a Hershey shaped wicker building that was gigantic. We could have built that whole thing as a miniature. Absolutely, we could have done that. We could have done it in the computer. We could have used substance, all that stuff, did all the things. The truth is we did it all. So what we did was we built just a wedge of like a pie piece of that Hershey kiss shaped thing. That way our miniature builders could focus on detail and trick out that one section. Then we scanned that section. We pulled pieces off of it, scanned those individually so we could use them modularly inside of the computer. And then when we brought that in and scaled it up, it was actually pretty incredible. I was there when we let one of the miniature artists on our show get into VR and scout his own miniature. And he had never done VR. It was the first time he'd ever done VR, and he'd certainly never shrunk himself down and went inside of his model before. And he almost cried. It was such a magical thing to see somebody experience their creation in a way that they never dreamed in a million years they'd be able to experience. They're standing inside of the set they built with their hands. So then we take that, we duplicate that, in that case, the pie piece all the way around. And then we have extremely, incredible talented artists at ILM will go through, trick out additional details on top of that. We scale it up and we project it on that LED wall. And you'd never know in a million years that we'd used all the tricks, that that thing had been built from miniatures, that it had CG stuff trickled in, that we had physical, practical build stuff on the day to our real world scale in the foreground. It's, to me, that's like awesome. It's the dream. You know what I mean? It's not just a bunch of folks sitting in at computers making stuff. And it's not just the model building thing. It's the best of both. We're not just building things for fun. We're like, how can we alter the way that traditional, some of the traditional filmmaking techniques, and how can we alter some of the digital filmmaking techniques and kind of bring them together? And that is 100%. I mean, that should be the tagline of how we're doing this stuff, because it's incredible. It's working with set decorators. Like I had said, we even get the greens department. The folks who are in charge of putting plants and dirt mounds, those folks are in VR saying, hey, I think on the day we should use these plants. I can get these. And then the visual effects supervisor's like, great. I think if we get those leaves, they're bigger and they won't create a moire pattern, and we won't have problems if it's too fine of a detailed grass. So it's just, it's incredible seeing how we're using all of these different traditional filmmaking techniques and traditional filmmaking people. It's incredible.
Cool. Awesome. I think that's, sorry, were you going to?
No, I was just saying, yeah.
Okay, good. I think that's a really cool, inspiring note to end on. So I just want to say thank you both very much for joining us all the way from presumably the west coast of the US. Thank you. Kenny DiGiordano from Halon Entertainment, Landis Fields from Industrial Light and Magic. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. All right. So that was Kenny DiGiordano and Landis Fields talking to us about their work on Disney's The Mandalorian. And that brings us to the end of this evening's program. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. We also want to say a quick thank you to the ViZARTS crew. ViZARTS is powered by Amunet Studio, and they're doing a fantastic job running the thing so far. So thank you very much, Amunet, ViZARTS crew. Don't forget that if you want to hang out and do some chatting with the rest of the people, we have what is it called? We have a chat program called GatherTown. You can find the information about how to log in the Facebook group and in the email that you received when you signed up. And yeah, that's it for this evening. And I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow night. Take care.
you.